Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Naruto was the forgotten dragon god of Ruijerd's clan A. ND raised the next hero, Naruto x Ghislaine x Roxy, Mushoku Tensei. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Awakening Dragon. Darkness, then pain. A splitting agony that coursed through every fiber of his being as consciousness returned like a thunderclap. The ancient tone beneath him cracked as his body convulsed, golden energy crackling across his skin in erratic patterns. Dust that had settled over centuries billowed upward, disturbed for the first time since the Great Cataclysm. Naruto Uzumaki, no, Orsted the dragon god, opened his eyes. The ceiling above him was a tapestry of faded murals, once brilliant depictions of cosmic battles now dulled by time and neglect. A massive crack ran through the center where roots had breached the sacred chamber. Sunlight filtered through in narrow, golden shafts that seemed to reach specifically for him, as if nature itself sought to rouse him from his slumber. How long? He rasped, his voice like stone grinding against stone after centuries of disuse. No answer came. The temple attendants, the guardian beasts, the eternal flames, all gone. Only silence greeted his question, a silence so profound it seemed to have weight. Naruto pushed himself to his feet, muscles screaming in protest. His form flickered between human and something else, something massive and serpentine, with scales that gleamed like polished sapphires. He forced the transformation back, containing the divine essence that threatened to burst forth. Not yet. He needed to understand what had happened first. The memories came in fragments. The war against Hitagami, the betrayal by Laplace, the desperate gambit to seal the dimensional breach. And then, nothing. A void where centuries should have been. The temple chamber was vast, circular, with 7 stone pillars arranged in a pattern that mirrored the constellation of the dragon's crown. At the center lay the cracked dais where he had slumbered, intricate seals etched into its surface now pulsing weakly with residual energy. The walls, once adorned with offerings and ceremonial weapons, stood bare. Only faded scripture remained, ancient prayers to the dragon gods written in a language few would now remember. He made his way to the temple entrance, each step becoming more fluid as his body remembered movement. The massive stone doors, designed to withstand the assault of demon lords, lay shattered. Beyond them stretched a vista that confirmed his worst fears. The sacred forest of Milishan had receded, giving way to an unfamiliar landscape. In the valley below, a small settlement had sprung up where once had stood the grand monastery of the Dragon Faith. The horizon, once dominated by the crystalline towers of the capital, now showed only wilderness stretching into the distance. A different age entirely, he murmured, a heaviness settling in his chest. The wind carried unfamiliar scents. Different crops, different cooking fires, different people. But beneath these new odors lurked something familiar. The acrid tang of fear, and beneath that, the unmistakable stench of spilled blood. His senses, dulled by dormancy, suddenly sharpened. A cry, high-pitched and desperate, echoed from the forest edge below. Without conscious thought, Naruto moved, his body becoming a golden blur as he raced down the overgrown temple steps. The forest welcomed him like an old friend, branches seeming to part as he passed. The cries grew louder, punctuated by gutter owl snarls that raised the hairs on the back of his neck. Demon beasts, lesser ones, but dangerous to ordinary humans. He burst into a small clearing and assessed the situation in an instant. 3 mantis-like creatures, each standing taller than a man, had cornered a silver-haired child against a rocky outcrop. The boy couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old, clutching a makeshift staff that glowed faintly with uncontrolled magical energy. The lead mantis lunged, serrated forelegs aimed at the child's throat. Naruto moved. One moment he stood at the clearing's edge, the next, he was between the child and the beast. His hand closed around the creature's foreleg. The mantis screeched, a sound like metal tearing, as Naruto's fingers crushed its chitinous limb to powder. Interesting, Naruto said, voice calm despite the situation. These weren't native to this region before. The mantis tried to retreat, but Naruto maintained his grip. With a casual flick of his wrist, he sent the creature flying into one of its companions. Both crashed through several trees before coming to rest, twitching and broken, nearly 50 yards away. The third mantis, displaying unusual intelligence for its kind, hesitated. Its compound eyes shifted between Naruto and the fallen child, calculating. Then, with surprising speed, it darted not toward them but into the underbrush. Naruto sighed. I suppose some things never change. Even beasts know when they're outmatched. He turned to the boy, who stared up at him with wide eyes the color of amethysts. An unusual trait, even among the diverse peoples of this continent. The child's clothing was simple but well made, a blue tunic over brown leggings, sturdy boots, and a traveling cloak now torn and muddy from his encounter. Are you hurt? Naruto asked, crouching to the child's level. The boy remained silent, trembling slightly as he clutched his staff. Up close, Naruto could see intricate carving on the wood, not decorative but functional. Channeling runes, crafted by someone with considerable skill. I'm not going to harm you, Naruto said, softening his tone. My name is. He paused. Which name should he use? The human name from his first life, or the divine title bestowed upon him in this world? Naruto. I'm called Naruto. The boy's trembling subsided slightly, though wariness remained in his eyes. Kale, he managed finally. My name is Kale. Quote, well met, Kale. That was impressive magic you were attempting. Naruto nodded toward the still glowing staff. Wind element, if I'm not mistaken. Though you're struggling to maintain the form. Surprise flickered across the child's face. You know magic. A smile tugged at Naruto's lips. I know many things. He extended his hand, palm up, and concentrated briefly. A perfect sphere of swirling wind formed above his palm, its currents visible as they captured dust particles from the air. Including how to properly channel wind energy. Kale's eyes widened with wonder. Fear momentarily forgotten. That's incredible. No containment circle, no incantation. He looked up at Naruto with newfound interest. Are you a mage from the academy? Not exactly. Naruto dissolved the wind sphere and rose to his feet, scanning the forest. Where are your parents, Kale? These woods are no place for a child alone. The light faded from the boy's eyes. I don't have any. Not anymore. The simple statement carried a weight that Naruto recognized all too well. How many orphans had been created in the wars he'd fought? How many had he created himself? When his divinity had overwhelmed his humanity? I see. Naruto's voice remained gentle. And what brings you to these ruins? This temple has been abandoned for. He hesitated, realizing he still didn't know the span of his dormancy. I come here to practice, Kale said, some confidence returning to his voice. The villagers don't like magic. They say it brings the demon beasts. He gestured to his staff. I found this in the river last spring. It helps me focus, but I'm still not very good. Naruto studied the staff more carefully. The runes were ancient, predating even his time in this world. A curious artifact for a child to possess, especially one with such obvious magical potential. These ruins are dangerous, Naruto said, helping the boy to his feet. There are worse things and mantis demons lurking in forgotten places. As if summoned by his words, a tremor ran through the ground. Both Naruto and Kale stiffened, though for different reasons. The boy from fear, Naruto from recognition. That wasn't a natural quake. Something's coming, Naruto murmured, pushing Kale behind him. Something that shouldn't be awake yet. The forest fell silent, even the birds ceased their calls. Sensing the approaching danger, Naruto felt it. A disturbance in the natural mana flow, a corruption that twisted the very essence of the world around it. What's happening? Kale whispered, clutching Naruto's sleeve. Before Naruto could answer, the ground erupted 20 yards away. Earth and stone showered the clearing as a massive form burst from below. What emerged resembled a centipede in basic structure. But its 100 legs ended in human-like hands, and its segmented body pulsed with sickly green light. Atop its thorax sat not an insect's head but a grotesque approximation of a human face. Features distorted as if molded by an unskilled child. Death worm, Naruto said, recognition and disgust mingling in his voice. An artificial demon beast, created during the last war. They should all have been destroyed. Quote, the creature's malformed face turned toward them, lipless mouth stretching into a grin that revealed rows of needle-like teeth. Dragon. God. It rasped, the words grating like broken glass. Awake! At last, Naruto stiffened. Not only was this abomination still alive, but it recognized him. Which meant someone or something had preserved knowledge of his existence through the centuries. Someone who had been waiting for his awakening. Stay behind me, he ordered Kale, his voice carrying an authority that brooked no argument. This isn't a natural creature. It's a corruption, magic and flesh twisted together by forbidden arts. The death worm undulated toward them, its 100 hands clawing at the earth. The master will be pleased, it gurgled through its malformed throat. The vessel and the god, together. Naruto's eyes narrowed. Vessel, he glanced at Kale, noting again the unusual color of his eyes, the natural affinity for magic. The ancient staff he somehow resonated with. There was no time to consider the implications. The death worm lunged with surprising speed, its body coiling to strike. Naruto pushed Kale aside and met the creature head-on, his right hand glowing with concentrated energy. Rasengan, he intoned, the word both familiar and strange on his tongue after so long. The spiraling sphere of chakra, no, mana in this world, collided with the death worm's face. For a moment, the two forces opposed each other, Naruto's controlled power against the chaotic energy animating the abomination. Then reality reasserted itself. The Rasengan drilled through the creature's pseudo-flesh, unraveling the magical bindings that held its unnatural form together. The death worm screamed, a sound no living throat should produce, as its body began to disintegrate from the head downward. Segment by segment, it collapsed into puddles of viscous fluid that smoked where it touched the ground. But even as it died, he creature's final words slithered into the air. Too late, the wheels turn again. Hitagami rises. Then it was gone, leaving only a scorched depression in the earth and the lingering stench of decay. Naruto stood motionless, the implications of those final words washing over him like ice water. Hitagami, the name he had hoped never to hear again. If that entity still existed, if it had somehow survived their final confrontation. A small hand tugged at his sleeve, pulling him from his dark thoughts. Are you a god? Kale asked, his young face solemn but unafraid. The monster called you that. A dragon god. Naruto looked down at the child. This unexpected complication in what should have been a simple awakening. How to answer such a direct question? The truth was complex, spanning multiple worlds and identities. Once, he had been just Naruto Uzumaki, a shinobi of the Hidden Leaf. Then fate and dimensional instability had brought him here, where his chakra had resonated this world's mana in unexpected ways, elevating him to something beyond human. I was called that, once, he finally said, choosing his words carefully. A long time ago. But names and titles matter less than actions, Kale. Remember that. The boy nodded slowly, accepting this non-answer with surprising maturity. Will more of those things come? Yes, Naruto said, seeing no point in lying. That creature recognized both of us. Me for what I once was, and you. He hesitated. I'm not sure why it was interested in you, but we should find out. How? Naruto gazed up at the temple ruins visible on the hillside above. We start there. I need to understand how long I've been gone and what's happened in my absence. He looked back at Kale. And you need a safer place to learn magic than a monster-infested forest. You mean, I should come with you? Hope and wariness battled in the boy's expression. If you wish. Naruto extended his hand. I could use a guide to this new age. And you could use someone to teach you proper control before you blow yourself up with that staff. Kale looked down at his staff, then back at Naruto. A smile slowly spread across his face, the first genuine one Naruto had seen. Deal. He grasped Naruto's hand firmly. As they started back toward the temple, Naruto remained alert, scanning the forest for further threats. The death worm's appearance troubled him deeply. Such creatures were abominations, created through forbidden magic that combined human and demon flesh with twisted mana. Their creation had been one of the atrocities that had precipitated the final war. If they walked the world again, it meant someone had accessed knowledge that should have been lost. Someone who knew of him, and apparently had interest in this orphan boy with unusual magical potential. The temple looked different in the afternoon light, less foreboding but more melancholy. Fallen columns and overgrown courtyards spoke of centuries of neglect. As they approached the main sanctuary where Naruto had awakened, he noticed something he had missed in his disoriented state earlier. A camp had been established near the entrance. A small tent, a cold fire pit, and neatly arranged research equipment. Someone's been studying the ruins, he observed. The blue-haired lady, Kale confirmed, nodding toward the camp. She comes every few days with books and strange instruments. She asks a lot of questions about the old writing on the walls. Blue-haired, Naruto's interest sharpened. Certain bloodlines in this world manifested unusual physical characteristics, and hair color often indicated magical affinities. What kind of questions? About the dragon gods, mostly, Kale said. She can read some of the old language. She told me this was a temple to Orsted, the dragon god of protection. But he disappeared a long time ago, after fighting something called the Void Enemy. The boy looked up at Naruto with sudden understanding. That was you, wasn't it? Naruto didn't answer immediately, distracted by movement from within the temple. A small figure emerged from the shadows, a woman barely over 5 feet tall, with blue hair cut in a practical bob and eyes the color of sunset. She wore the practical robes of a traveling mage, with various instruments and pouches attached to a belt at her waist. In her hands, she clutched an NT tome bound in what appeared to be dragon hide. She froze upon seeing them, her eyes widening as they fixed on Naruto. Her free hand moved subtly toward a wand holstered at her hip. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice surprisingly authoritative despite her diminutive stature. "This site is under the protection of the Ranoa Magic Academy. Unauthorized persons are not permitted to disturb the artifacts. He saved me from monsters," Kale piped up before Naruto could respond. "A death worm and 3 mantises." The woman's gaze shifted to the boy, softening slightly. "Kale, I've told you it's dangerous to come here alone." Her eyes returned to Naruto, suspicious and calculating. "Death worms are extinct. They were eradicated after the Divine War." "Apparently not all of them," Naruto said. "And they remember more than they should." Something in his tone made the woman's eyes narrow. She studied him more carefully. His unusual whisker markings, the golden hair, the strange clothes. That had somehow survived centuries without decay. Realization dawned in her expression, followed immediately by disbelief. "Impossible," she whispered. "The dormancy period was calculated to last at least another century. And without the proper awakening ritual." She swallowed hard. "You're him, aren't you? Orsted, the forgotten god." Naruto inclined his head slightly, neither confirming nor denying. "And you are." The woman seemed to remember herself. She straightened, hand falling away from her wand as she offered a formal bow. "Roxy Megardia, Water Saint and Research Fellow of Ranoa Magic Academy's Department of Ancient Civilizations. She's been studying the temple for months," Kale added helpfully. "She gives me sweet bread when I help her clean the inscriptions." Roxy shot the boy an exasperated look before returning her attention to Naruto. "If you truly are who I think you are, then your awakening changes everything." She gestured to the temple around them. "The legends say you entered dormancy after sealing the void breach, but would return when the world faced a similar threat." Her gaze turned searching. "Is it happening again? Is the void breaking through?" "I don't know," Naruto answered truthfully. "My awakening was unexpected. I need information about the current state of the world." He nodded toward her book. "And perhaps you need information that only I can provide." A scholarly light kindled in Roxy's eyes. "A fair exchange." She hesitated, glancing at the darkening sky. "Night falls quickly in these mountains, and the demon beasts grow more aggressive after dark. We should continue this discussion at my camp. I can offer a meal and shelter." "A wise suggestion," Naruto agreed. "Lead the way, Water Saint Megardia." "Just Roxy is fine," she said, a hint of color touching her cheeks. "Titles are cumbersome in the field." As they followed the petite mage to her camp, Kale moved closer to Naruto, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "She's nice, but she gets really excited about old stuff. Sometimes she forgets to eat when she's translating." Naruto smiled faintly. "Scholars are often like that, regardless of the era." Roxy's camp was modest but well organized. A sturdy tent weatherproofed with water magic, a fire pit ringed with stones carved with flame-controlling runes, and several storage chests secured with both physical locks and magical seals. She quickly set about preparing a meal, simple trail rations enhanced with preserved herbs and spices. As the sky darkened to indigo and stars began to appear, Roxy activated a series of small mana stones that cast a soft blue light over the camp. The three settled around the fire, the atmosphere heavy with unasked questions. 743 years, Roxy finally said, breaking the silence. Naruto, who had been watching the flames, looked up. "Pardon, since you entered dormancy," she clarified, her voice taking on the precise tone of an academic. 743 years, 4 months, and approximately 16 days, according to the unified calendar established after the Divine War. The number struck Naruto like a physical blow. 7 centuries. Everyone he had known, companions, enemies, those who had worshipped him and those who had feared him, all dust now. The world he had fought to protect would have changed beyond recognition. "I see," he said, his voice carefully neutral despite the emotional turmoil beneath. "And the current political situation. The major powers." Roxy set aside her bowl and pulled out a rolled parchment from her pack. With practiced movements, she spread it on the ground, revealing a detailed map. Not unlike the continent Naruto remembered, yet with significant changes to borders and settlements. "The human kingdoms have consolidated into 3 major powers," she explained, pointing to different colored regions. "The Holy Milis Empire in the west, the Asura Kingdom in the central regions, and the Ranoa Federation in the east, where we currently are." Her finger moved to differently shaded areas. "The beast tribes maintain autonomy in the northern territories and southern archipelago, though many have integrated into human societies. The demon races," she hesitated, "they've become increasingly isolated in the past century, particularly the Supered." "Ruijerd's people," Naruto murmured, recognizing the name from the human's prompt. Roxy's eyes widened slightly. "You knew Ruijerd Superdia." The histories mention a Supered warrior who fought alongside Orsted, but most scholars dismissed it as legend. The Supered have been reviled for centuries due to their role in the Divine War. "A misunderstanding," Naruto said, old anger stirring. "Ruijerd and his clan fought against Laplace, not for him. They paid a heavy price for their loyalty." "History is written by the victors," Roxy said softly. "And fear makes for poor record-keeping." She traced a mountainous region on the map's eastern edge. "The remaining Supered live here, in near-complete isolation. Few who enter their territory return." Naruto filed this information away. The Supered had been staunch allies, his most loyal followers in the final days of the war. Their treatment in his absence was another weight on his conscience. "You mentioned Hitagami earlier," Kale said suddenly, looking up from the map. "The monster in the forest said that name too. Who is it?" Roxy and Naruto exchanged glances, her curious, his guarded. "In current theology," Roxy began carefully, "Hitagami is considered the principal deity of the Milis religion, the human god who guides and protects mankind." "A convenient disguise," Naruto said, unable to keep the edge from his voice. "Hitagami is an entity that exists between dimensions. It cannot directly manifest in this world, but influences events through manipulation and chosen agents." He stared into the fire, memories of ancient betrayals surfacing. "We call it the Void Enemy because it sought to unravel the barriers between worlds for its own purposes. The sacred texts mention a conflict between Orsted and Hitagami," Roxy said, watching him carefully. "But the details were deliberately obscured in later revisions. The dragon faith was systematically suppressed as Milis worship expanded." "Of course it was," Naruto said with a bitter smile. "Hitagami always played the long game." The fire popped and sparked, sending embers swirling into the night sky. Kale, who had been listening intently, yawned widely despite his obvious interest in the conversation. Roxy noticed immediately. "It's late, and you've had a trying day," she told the boy. "You can take my tent. I'll need to stay up and document recent developments." Kale looked ready to protest, but another yawn undermined his argument. With reluctance, he retreated to the tent, though not before extracting a promise from Naruto to continue the discussion tomorrow. Once the boy's breathing had settled into the rhythm of sleep, Roxy turned to Naruto, her expression now unguarded and intense. There are questions I need to ask that aren't suitable for a child's ears, she said quietly. About what's happening now, and what it means for our future. You believe my awakening signals something significant, Naruto observed. The prophecies are explicit. When the forgotten god rises from slumber, the cycle of destruction begins anew. She met his gaze steadily. In the past 2 years, reports of extinct demon beasts have increased tenfold. Spatial distortions have been detected at ancient mana nexuses. The North Star has shifted position for the first time in recorded history. She leaned forward. These aren't coincidences. Something is coming, isn't it? Naruto considered his response carefully. This woman was clearly intelligent and knowledgeable, but how much should he reveal? The full truth might do more harm than good at this stage. The death worm recognized both me and the boy. He finally said, "It called Kale, the vessel. Does that mean anything to you?" Roxy's brow furrowed. There are references in obscure texts to a dragon vessel, a more tall capable of channeling divine power without being consumed by it. Such individuals were supposedly rare even in your time. She glanced toward the tent where Kale slept. You think he might be one? I don't know, but someone else seems to think so, and they sent that abomination to collect him. Naruto's expression hardened. I won't let that happen. You've taken an interest in him quickly, Roxy observed. A note of curiosity in her voice. Naruto didn't immediately respond. Why had he interfered? Why did he feel this strange protectiveness toward a child he'd just met? Perhaps because in Kale's eyes, he saw something familiar, the same determination he had once possessed, before godhood and centuries of conflict had tempered it with weariness. He reminds me of someone I used to know, Naruto finally said. Someone who refused to give up, even when the odds were impossible. Roxy seemed to accept this answer. She pulled out a journal and began making notes, occasionally glancing up at Naruto as if reassuring herself he was really there. I've spent my career studying the dragon faith and the divine war, she said as she wrote. I always believed there was truth behind the legends, but to actually meet you. She shook her head in wonder. There are so many questions. The nature of your divinity. The true cause of the dimensional instabilities. The connection between chakra and mana. All interesting academic points, Naruto interrupted gently, but perhaps not the most pressing concerns. Roxy flushed slightly. You're right, of course. Priority should be Ivan to understanding the current threats. She set aside her journal. Tomorrow we should return to Ranoa. The Academy has resources that could help us, and contacts throughout the continent who can verify if similar phenomena are occurring elsewhere. And Kale. The Academy accepts exceptional students regardless of background or age, Roxy said. His natural affinity for magic would qualify him for a scholarship. He would be safe there, and properly trained. Naruto nodded slowly, considering the suggestion. An academic institution would indeed be safer than a rural village, especially if unknown forces were targeting the boy. And it would give Naruto access to information he desperately needed. Very well, he agreed. We'll depart in the morning. Roxy smiled, clearly pleased with this decision. I should warn you, she added, that your appearance will cause quite a stir. The dragon god's return isn't something we can keep secret for long. I don't intend to announce my identity immediately, Naruto said. Better to observe and gather information before drawing attention. Wise, Roxy conceded. I can introduce you as a fellow researcher specializing in pre-divine war artifacts. It would explain your unusual knowledge and appearance. As they finalized their plans, Naruto found his attention repeatedly drawn to the sleeping form of Kale visible through the tent's open flap. The boy had curled around his staff even in sleep, one hand resting protectively on the ancient runes. A vessel. The concept troubled him deeply. In the old days, vessels were often little more than sacrificial pawns in the games of gods and demons, mortal shells to contain power too vast for human comprehension. Few survived the experience with their minds intact. If someone was grooming Kale for such a fate, you should rest, Roxy said, interrupting his dark thoughts. Even divine beings need recovery after centuries of dormancy. Naruto almost smiled at her practical tone. I'll take first watch, he countered. Old habits. Roxy seemed about to protest, then thought better of it. Wake me in 4 hours, then. The mountain paths are treacherous enough without exhaustion clouding our judgment. She retreated to a bedroll laid out near the fire's warmth, though not before casting a subtle barrier spell around the perimeter of their camp. Naruto recognized the technique, an alarm ward that would trigger if anything larger than a rabbit crossed the boundary. Once her breathing settled into the rhythm of sleep, Naruto closed his eyes, not to rest but to meditate. He turned his awareness inward, examining the state of his divine power. The long dormancy had not diminished it, but had changed its nature somehow. The chakra he had brought from his original woe, RLD, had fully integrated with this world's mana, creating something unique, neither fully human nor fully divine. His connection to the dragon realm remained, though attenuated by time and disuse. He could feel the other divine dragons stirring in their respective domains, aware of his awakening. None had yet reached out, which suggested either caution or something preventing direct communication. A memory surfaced, the final battle. 7 centuries ago, the dimensional breach that threatened to swallow 3 worlds. The desperate alliance between beings who had been enemies for eons. Hitogame's betrayal, Laplace's sacrifice, and finally, Naruto's decision to use his own life force to seal the breach, entering a dormant state that should have lasted a full millennium. Something had disrupted that timeline. Something had awakened him prematurely, and he suspected it was the same force that had sent the death worm to capture Kale. The night deepened around him, stars wheeling overhead in patterns both familiar and strange. This world that had become his home felt different now, the mana currents altered, the very air carrying scents and energies that hadn't existed before his dormancy. A soft sound drew his attention to the tent. Kale had emerged, rubbing sleep from his eyes, his silver hair tousled. "Couldn't sleep?" Naruto asked quietly, careful not to wake Roxy. The boy shook his head. "Bad dreams." He hesitated, then asked, "Is it true? What you said about being a god?" Naruto sighed. The question again, and from the same pure source, a child's curiosity, untempered by fear or reverence. "What do you think a god is, Kale?" He countered gently. The boy considered this, brow furrowing in thought. "The village priest says gods are perfect beings who watch over us and judge our actions." But, he looked up at the star-filled sky. If gods were perfect, wouldn't the world be perfect too? A surprisingly astute observation from one so young. "Indeed," Naruto said, "in my experience, gods are simply beings with greater power and longer lives than humans. We make mistakes. We have regrets." He looked down at his hands, hands that had both created and destroyed, saved and damned. "Sometimes terrible ones, but you still try to do good things," Kale said with the simple certainty of childhood. "You saved me today." "Yes," Naruto agreed, smiling faintly. "I suppose I did." The boy yawned again, the excitement of the day finally overtaking his curiosity. Naruto gently guided him back to the tent, where he quickly fell asleep once more. Left alone with his thoughts, Naruto turned his gaze back to the stars. 700 years. A blink in cosmic terms, yet an eternity for the mortal world. What role was he meant to play in this new age? Protector, teacher, or perhaps, after so long, simply observer? The death worm's dying words echoed in his memory. Too late. The wheels turn again. Hitogame rises. If his ancient enemy was indeed returning, if the dimensional boundaries were once again weakening, then his awakening was no accident. The cycle of conflict that had defined his existence in this world was beginning anew. But this time, he was not alone. He had awakened to find a child with extraordinary potential and a scholar brave enough to seek truth in ancient ruins. Perhaps allies would be found in unexpected places in this new era. As dawn approached, Naruto roused Roxy as promised. She awakened instantly, alert in the way of one accustomed to field research in dangerous territories. "Any disturbances?" she asked, running a hand through her blue hair. "Nothing significant," Naruto replied. A few lesser beasts tested the boundary but retreated when they sensed the ward. Roxy nodded, satisfied, and began preparing for departure with efficient movements. She had clearly spent much time in the field, her routine polished to minimize wasted effort. "We should reach the main road by midday," she said as she packed her equipment. "From there, we can hire a carriage to Ranoa City. The academy will want to document your awakening properly." "Document, or study?" Naruto asked with mild amusement. Roxy had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. Both. I imagine. You represent an unprecedented opportunity to understand the divine era firsthand. She hesitated. But I give you my word that you will be treated with respect, not as a specimen. Before Naruto could respond, Kale emerged from the tent, looking refreshed despite his interrupted night. The boy quickly joined in the preparations, showing surprising competence for his age as he helped dismantle the camp. As they worked, Naruto noticed how the first light of dawn caught on Kale's silver hair, giving it an almost luminous quality. Again, he was struck by the boy's unusual coloring and the natural way he manipulated mana without formal training. There was something special about this child beyond his potential as a vessel, something Naruto couldn't quite identify but felt instinctively. With the camp packed and a light breakfast consumed, they began their descent from the temple hill. Roxy led the way, familiar with the safest paths through the rugged terrain. Kale followed, occasionally stopping to examine interesting plants or stones, his curiosity seemingly boundless. Naruto brought up the rear, his senses extended to detect any threat that might approach from behind. The forest was different in daylight, less menacing but no less wild. Ancient trees with trunks wider than village houses created a canopy that filtered the morning sun into dappled patterns. Creatures both familiar and strange moved through the underbrush, most fleeing at their approach. Naruto recognized some species from his previous time, while others were entirely new to him, evidence of how ecosystems had evolved during his dormancy. The local villagers avoid this forest, Roxy explained as they walked. They believe it's haunted by the spirits of fallen warriors from the Divine War. Not entirely inaccurate, considering the residual mana distortions from that conflict. Many died here, Naruto confirmed, memories of ancient battles surfacing. The temple was a stronghold in the final days, one of the last bastions against Laplace's corrupted forces. The histories say Laplace was once a dragon god himself before his fall, Roxy said, glancing back with scholarly interest. Is that true? He was demon god, not dragon god, Naruto corrected. But yes, once an ally before Hitogame's influence corrupted him. The old grief still felt fresh, despite the centuries. He was a friend, before the end. Kale, who had been listening intently, asked, what happened to him? The books just say he was defeated. Partially sealed, not destroyed, Naruto said, choosing his words carefully. His essence was split into 3 parts, mind, power, and soul, each reincarnating separately to prevent his full return. He frowned. At least, that was the intention. The Laplace factor, Roxy murmured. There are theories that certain individuals throughout history have carried fragments of his reincarnated aspects. The Academy has documented several cases of extraordinary magical aptitude or strategic genius that seem to manifest suddenly in otherwise ordinary bloodlines. This was news to Naruto, and concerning news at that. The seal on Laplace should have prevented any manifestation of his power or consciousness for at least a millennium. If fragments were already emerging, we should hurry to Ranoa, he said, quickening his pace slightly. There's more happening here than I initially thought. They continued in thoughtful silence for a time, each processing the implications of their discussion. The path gradually widened as they descended, eventually bringing them to a clearing where ancient stonework emerged from the forest floor, remnants of a road that had once connected the temple to the capital city. As they paused to rest, Naruto felt a subtle shift in the air, a disturbance in the natural mana flow that triggered ancient instincts. He stiffened, scanning their surroundings with heightened senses. We're being watched, he said quietly, positioning himself between the potential threat and his companions. Roxy immediately reached for her wand, eyes narrowing as she extended her magical awareness. I don't sense any demon beasts, she whispered. Not beasts, Naruto confirmed. Human. 3, no, 4 individuals. Well concealed, but their magical signatures disrupt the natural flow. He caught a flicker of movement in the branches above, so subtle that even his enhanced senses nearly missed it. Without warning, he grabbed Kale and Roxy, pulling them down as several objects whistled through the air where they had been standing. The projectiles embedded themselves in a nearby tree trunk with metallic thuds. Mana-infused throwing needles, Roxy identified, examining one without touching it. Assassin Guild tactics. Not quite, Naruto said, noting the distinctive craftsmanship. These are shinobi tools, from my original world. Before either could respond to this revelation, 4 figures dropped from the canopy, surrounding them in a practiced formation. They wore close-fitting dark garments with faces concealed behind featureless masks, 1 white, 1 red, 1 black, and 1 blue. Each carried weapons that Naruto recognized immediately: kunai, shuriken, and short tanto blades. Impossible, he breathed. No one in this world should possess such equipment or knowledge. The dimensional barriers had been sealed to prevent exactly this kind of cross-world contamination. The white masked figure stepped forward, hands forming a series of gestures that sent a chill through Naruto. Hand signs. Ninja hand signs from the elemental nations. Target confirmed, the assassin said in a voice distorted by some jutsu. Dragon God Orsted, your awakening violates the dimensional accord. You will be returned to dormancy. Permanently. Who sent you? Naruto demanded, mind racing through the implications. How did you cross the barrier? The barrier thins, replied the red mask. The human god guides our path between worlds. Hitagami. Of course. Somehow, his ancient enemy had found a way to manipulate the dimensional barriers, to send agents from Naruto's original world into this one. Roxy. Naruto said without taking his eyes off the assassins, take Kale and run. Follow the old road, I'll find you. But, she began to protest. Now, the command carried the weight of divinity, impossible to ignore. Roxy grabbed Kale's hand and fled, her small form surprisingly quick as she pulled the boy along the ancient road. The black-masked assassin moved to intercept them, but Naruto was faster. Much faster. One moment he stood in the center of the formation. The next, he had the black-masked figure by the throat, lifting them off the ground with casual strength. Your quarrel is with me, Naruto said, his voice deadly calm as golden energy began to swirl around him. Leave the boy and the woman out of this. The remaining 3 assassins attacked simultaneously, moving with the coordinated precision that marked elite shinobi training. The blue mask unleashed a water jutsu that Naruto hadn't seen in centuries, a spiraling dragon that roared toward him with crushing force. The red mask followed with a barrage of explosive tags attached to kunai, while the white mask performed a series of hand signs for what appeared to be a space-time ninjutsu. Naru, to release the black mask and responded with terrible efficiency. His right hand shot out, palm forward, dispersing the water dragon with a concentrated burst of chakra. His left hand caught the explosive kunai and, with a flick of his wrist, redirected them toward the white mask, disrupting the space-time jutsu mid-formation. The resulting explosion sent all 4 assassins flying backward. But, they recovered quickly, too quickly for normal humans. As they regrouped, Naruto noticed a distinctive purple glow emanating from within their bodies. Cursed seals, he muttered, recognizing the corrupted chakra signature. Orochimaru's work, or something derived from it. The white mask raised a hand, and the 4 assassins synchronized their movements, performing identical hand signs in perfect unison. The ground beneath Naruto began to glow with an intricate seal pattern that he recognized with growing alarm, a divine imprisonment jutsu, designed specifically to contain beings of his nature. They had come prepared for him specifically. This was no random encounter. The seal activated, pillars of light erupting from the ground to form a cage around him. Naruto felt the distinctive pull on his divine essence as the jutsu attempted to separate his godly and human natures, a painful process that would effectively destroy him if completed. But the assassins had made one critical miscalculation. Naruto was neither fully god nor fully human anymore. His centuries in this world had transformed him into something unique, a fusion of chakra and mana that operated on principles beyond either world's understanding. He closed his eyes, allowing the jutsu to begin the separation. The assassins watched expectantly as golden light began to seep from his body, collecting in the seal pattern below. But instead of weakening him, the process clarified something Naruto had sensed since his awakening, the true nature of his transformed power. With a sudden surge of both chakra and mana, Naruto shattered the light cage from within. The backlash sent waves of energy rippling outward, flattening the surrounding forest and sending the assassins tumbling backward. You understand nothing about what I've become, Naruto said, his voice resonating with power as he straightened. His appearance shifted subtly, his whisker marks deepening, his eyes changing from blue to slitted gold, faint scales appearing along his jawline. I am neither the shinobi who left the elemental nations nor simply the dragon god who fought Hitagami. I am both, and something more. The assassins regrouped, but uncertainty had replaced their earlier confidence. The white mask made a subtle gesture, and they spread out, preparing for another coordinated attack. Naruto didn't give them the chance. Moving faster than human eyes could track, he appeared behind the blue mask, striking with precise force at the base of the spine where the cursed seal's anchor point would be located. The assassin collapsed, the purple glow fading from their body. The remaining three attacked simultaneously, the red mask from above with a fire jutsu, the black mask from below with an earth technique, and the white masked Ekli with some kind of lightning-enhanced blade. Naruto countered each with movements that seemed almost casual despite their deadly precision. The fire jutsu he absorbed and redirected, forcing the red mask to dodge their own amplified technique. The earth technique he disrupted with a stomp that sent shockwaves through the ground. And the lightning blade he caught bare-handed, the electricity harmlessly dispersing through his body. Enough, he said, genuine regret in his voice. I take no pleasure in this. With movements too fast to follow, Naruto disabled the remaining assassins, the cursed seals with surgical precision. As the last fell unconscious, he knelt beside the white mask, apparently the leader, and carefully removed it. The face beneath was young, barely out of adolescence, with features that carried a disturbing familiarity. Naruto had seen similar bone structure before, in another life, among members of a particular clan. Hyuga, he murmured, noting the distinctive eye structure even with the Byakugan inactive. What has Hitagami done to your clan? The young assassin stirred, eyes flickering open. Without the mask and cursed seal, confusion replaced the earlier murderous intent. Where? The young man whispered, looking around in disorientation. How did I get here? You don't remember? Naruto asked, suspicion growing. I was on a mission, border patrol near Suna. The Hyuga winced, raising a hand to his temple. Then, nothing clear, just fragments. A voice giving orders, a golden light, and his eyes widened as he focused on Naruto. I know you from somewhere. Quote, what is your name? Naruto asked gently. Hyuga Hiyashi, the young man replied. Branch family, 2nd Division. Naruto concealed his shock. Hiyashi had been a prominent figure in Konoha during his youth, but that had been many decades ago even in his original timeline. Either this was a descendant bearing the same name, or something far more disturbing was happening with the flow of time between dimensions. Rest now, Naruto said, pressing a specific point on the young Hyuga's neck that would induce a healing sleep. When you wake, we'll figure out what's happening. He repeated the process with the other three assassins, first confirming that they too seemed to have no memory of how they had come to be in this world or who had sent them. L bore the distinctive chakra signatures of shinobi clans Naruto recognized, Uchiha, Nara, and Inuzuka, yet none seemed to recognize him beyond a vague sense of familiarity. Once they were secured, Naruto created 4 shadow clones, a technique he hadn't used in centuries, but which came back to him naturally. The clones would watch over the unconscious shinobi while he caught up with Roxy and Kale. As he set off along the ancient road, Naruto's mind worked furiously to process this new development. Shinobi from the elemental nations, brought here through weakening dimensional barriers. Cursed seals that overrode their conscious minds. And Hitagami, somehow orchestrating everything from beyond the dimensional veil. The implications were deeply troubling. If the barriers had weakened enough for physical transport between worlds, the situation was far more dire than he had initially assumed. The seals he and his allies had placed at the end of the Divine War were failing faster than predicted. He caught up with Roxy and Kale several miles down the road. They had taken shelter in the hollow trunk of a massive fallen tree, Roxy maintaining a concealment barrier that would have fooled most pursuers. It's me, he called softly as he approached, sensing her magic ready to strike. They've been neutralized. The barrier wavered and dissolved, revealing Roxy standing protectively in front of Kale, wand still raised. What were those people? She demanded as soon as she confirmed it was truly him. Their techniques weren't like any magic I've ever seen. Because it wasn't magic, At least not as you understand it. Naruto replied, glancing at Kale, who watched with wide, curious eyes. They were from my original world, or their ancestors were. They used chakra, not mana. Chakra, Roxy repeated, her scholar's interest visibly piqued despite the situation. The spiritual energy from the Eastern legends. But I thought the dimensional barriers prevented such crossover. They should, Naruto confirmed grimly. The fact that these assassins made it through confirms my worst fears. The barriers are failing, and faster than I expected. The professor says barriers need anchors, Kale piped up unexpectedly. When I was helping her in the temple, she said the dragon gods created anchor points to hold the dimensions apart. Naruto and Roxy both looked at the boy in surprise. That's correct, Roxy said slowly. The theoretical models suggest interdimensional barriers require stable reference points in each connected realm. But that's advanced metaphysical theory. Not something most adults could grasp, let alone. She trailed off, studying Kale with newfound interest. I just remember things sometimes, the boy said with a shrug. Pictures and words pop into my head, even if I don't understand them. Naruto crouched to the boy's level, looking directly into those unusual purple eyes. Kale, how long have you been able to remember things you haven't been taught? The boy thought for a moment. Since the big storm last winter. Lightning hit the tree outside my window, and I had strange dreams for days afterward. That's when I found the staff in the river, too. Naruto exchanged a meaningful glance with Roxy. Winter would coincide with the increased spatial distortions she had mentioned earlier. And lightning, particularly natural lightning, as known to occasionally create temporary weak points in dimensional barriers. We need to get to Ranoa as quickly as possible, Naruto decided. Both for safety and to access the Academy's resources. They set off again, maintaining a brisk pace along the ancient road. As the sun climbed higher, the forest gradually thinned, giving way to rolling hills and eventually cultivated farmland. Civilization, or at least its outskirts, appeared on the horizon by early afternoon. The small farming village showed clear signs of prosperity, well-maintained buildings, orderly fields, and a bustling market square visible even from a distance. People moved about their daily business with the unhurried confidence of those living in peaceful times. Sharia village, Roxy identified as they approached. Known for its grain exports and annual harvest festival. There's a regular carriage service to Ranoa City from here. As they entered the village proper, Naruto observed how different it was from settlements he remembered. Technology had advanced, not dramatically, but noticeably. Magical devices for lighting and climate control were commonplace rather than luxuries. Clothing styles had evolved, communications seemed more sophisticated, and the general standard of living appeared higher. 7 centuries of progress, without the interruption of major conflicts. At least some good had come from their sacrifices during the Divine War. Their appearance drew curious stares from villagers. Roxy's blue hair marked her as a water attribute mage, which seemed to command a certain respect. Kale attracted sympathetic glances, likely due to his travel-worn appearance and obvious youth. But it was Naruto who caused the most reaction, whispered conversations, sidelong looks, and in some cases, hastily made protective gestures. Your appearance is distinctive, Roxy murmured as they made their way toward what appeared to be a transportation hub at the village center. The whisker marks in particular are associated with the dragon god in religious iconography. I thought you said the dragon faith was suppressed, Naruto replied quietly. Officially, yes, but folk beliefs persist, especially in rural areas. She nodded toward an elderly woman who had made an elaborate gesture upon seeing Naruto. That's the dragon's eye blessing, supposedly protects against misfortune. It was banned by Millis Church 300 years ago but never truly disappeared. They reached the transportation hub, a circular plaza with various carriages and what appeared to be magically animated carts arranged around a central dispatch office. Roxy approached a uniformed official and presented what Naruto recognized as an academy identification medallion. After a brief discussion and exchange of coins, she returned with a satisfied expression. We're in luck. There's a direct service to Ranoa City departing in 1 hour. Academy credentials got us priority seating. While they waited, Roxy purchased food from a nearby stall, freshly baked bread stuffed with spiced meat and vegetables. Kale devoured his portion with the enthusiasm of a growing boy, while Naruto ate more slowly, savoring flavors both familiar and new. The spice profile has changed, he observed. More northern influence than I remember. Roxy nodded appreciatively at his observation. Trade routes shifted after the coastal cities were established. The northern archipelago became a major exporter of spices and medicinal herbs about 200 years ago. As they ate, Naruto noticed a group of village children had gathered at a respectful distance. Watching them with undisguised curiosity, one particularly bold girl of perhaps 10 years approached, clutching something in her hands. "Excuse me," she said with careful formality, "but are you him? The one from the stories?" Before Naruto could respond, the girl's mother hurried over, looking mortified. "Meia. Don't bother the travelers with nonsense." She offered an apologetic bow to Naruto. "I'm so sorry, sir. The children have wild imaginations." "It's quite all right," Naruto assured her with a gentle smile. "What stories are these, young one?" Emboldened by his response, the girl held out what she'd been clutching, a crude wooden figure carved in the likeness of a man with dragon features. "Grandfather says the dragon god will return when the bad star appears. The one with the tail." She pointed upward. "It came last month." Her mother looked even more embarrassed. "My father-in-law fills her head with old legends. The comet is just a celestial phenomenon. Nothing to do with ancient superstitions." "A comet?" Naruto asked sharply, looking to Roxy for confirmation. The blue-haired mage nodded. "The serpent's tear. It appears every 7 centuries, according to astronomical records." Her eyes widened with sudden realization. "Exactly every 7 centuries. The same time period as my dormancy cycle," Naruto murmured, the implications clear. "Not a coincidence." The girl's mother, sensing the shift in atmosphere, gently pulled her daughter away with another apologetic bow. As they left, the girl called back, "Grandfather says you'll protect us when the sky breaks." Those words sent a chill through Naruto. The sky breaks. Another reference to dimensional weakening, preserved in folk memory for centuries. "We need to see this comet," he told Roxy quietly. "It's visible only at midnight," she replied. "We should reach Ranoa by then, assuming the carriage maintains schedule." Their transportation arrived shortly after, a large, enclosed carriage drawn by what appeared to be horses but with distinctive blue manes that rippled like water. Magical beasts, bred for speed and endurance. The interior was comfortably appointed with cushioned seats and magical lighting. As the only passengers on this departure, they had the space to themselves. Once they were underway, rolling smoothly along a well-maintained road, Roxy activated a privacy barrier, a subtle shimmer that enclosed their seating area. "Now we can speak freely," she said. "Sound won't carry beyond the barrier." Naruto nodded appreciatively at her foresight. "You mentioned the Academy has been tracking spatial anomalies. What exactly have they observed?" Roxy produced a small crystal from her pack, activating it with a touch. A 3-dimensional map of T. Continent materialized above the crystal, with numerous points of light scattered across its surface. Each light represents a confirmed spatial distortion within the past year, she explained. Typical background levels would show perhaps 5 or 6 such events annually. We've recorded over 200. The pattern was immediately apparent to Naruto, the distortions clustered around specific locations, many of which he recognized as ancient power nexuses or battle sites from the Divine War. They're focusing on weak points, he observed. Places where the dimensional fabric was previously damaged and repaired. Exactly our conclusion, Roxy confirmed. The Academy established monitoring stations at the major nexuses, but we lack the resources to cover all potential sites. Kale, who had been watching the map with fascination, pointed to one of the largest clusters. "That's near where you found me, isn't it?" Naruto leaned closer, recognizing the location. "The Temple of the Dragon's Crown. One of the primary anchor points for the dimensional seal." He frowned. "Why were you there, Kale? What brought you to that particular forest?" The boy hesitated, uncertainty crossing his face. "I don't really remember deciding to go there. I just felt like I needed to. Like something was pulling me." He touched his staff, fingers tracing the ancient runes. "That's where I found this floating in the sacred pool behind the temple. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place for Naruto. The staff was no ordinary magical focus, it was a divine artifact, specifically a dragon conductor. Designed to help mortal vessels channel divine power safely. They had been incredibly rare even in his time, most lost during the early conflicts with Hitagami. The death worm called you, the vessel, Naruto said slowly. And now I understand why. Someone or something is positioning you as a potential host for divine power. Host, Kale repeated, eyes widening with alarm. Like, possession. Not exactly, Roxy interjected, her tone deliberately calm and scholarly. Historical accounts describe vessels as partners to divine entities, not merely containers. They maintained their identity and will, while gaining access to powers beyond normal human capacity. But why me? Kale asked, the question small and bewildered. That, Naruto said, is what we need to discover. He gently took the staff from Kale's hands, examining it more carefully. The runes were indeed ancient, older even than his time in this world, and arranged in a pattern he recognized from the Origi Null sealing ritual that had created the dimensional barriers. This staff, he said slowly, is a key. Not just a tool for channeling magic, but literally a key to something sealed away. He returned it to Kale, watching as the runes brightened slightly at the boy's touch. And for some reason, it responds to you specifically. The carriage rumbled onward as darkness fell, the countryside giving way to more developed regions. Occasional waypoints marked with magical lights indicated their progress toward Ranoa City. Inside, the three travelers continued their discussion, piecing together the fragments of a puzzle spanning centuries and worlds. As midnight approached, the carriage driver announced they were nearing the outskirts of Ranoa City. Roxy deactivated the privacy barrier and moved to one of the windows, gesturing for the others to join her. There, she said, pointing to the northern sky. The Serpent's Tear. A brilliant blue-white star hung in the darkness, trailing a Minu's tail that stretched across nearly a quarter of the visible sky. Unlike ordinary comets, this one pulsed with rhythmic light, the tail occasionally splitting into multiple streamers before reforming. It's beautiful, Kale whispered. Awestruck. And dangerous, Naruto added, recognizing the phenomenon for what it truly was. That's no comet. It's a dimensional fracture becoming visible in our sky. As if confirming his words, the comet suddenly flared with impossible brightness. For a brief moment, the night sky seemed to crack along the comet's path, revealing glimpses of something beyond, another sky, with unfamiliar constellations and three pale moons. Then the vision was gone, the comet returning to its previous appearance, though perhaps pulsing more rapidly than before. What was that? Roxy asked, her composed scholarly demeanor momentarily shaken. A glimpse of another world pressing against our own, Naruto replied grimly. The barriers are weakening faster than I feared. We may have less time than I thought. Kale, still staring at the comet, spoke in an odd, distant voice. When the crown breaks, the king shall return. When the eye opens, the worlds shall tremble. When the hand reaches forth, the vessel must choose. He blinked suddenly, looking confused. What did I just say? Naruto and Roxy exchanged alarmed glances. Those words, that prophecy, was on of the most closely guarded secrets of the dragon faith, known only to the highest priests and the dragon gods themselves. The final revelation, Naruto said quietly. The prophecy of the convergence. Before he could elaborate, the carriage began to slow as they entered the outskirts of Ranoa City. Through the windows, they could see a metropolis vastly different from the simple farming village they had left behind. Towers of stone and crystal rose hundreds of feet into the air, connected by graceful arched bridges. Magical lights in a rainbow of colors illuminated wide boulevards and bustling plazas even at this late hour. In the distance, on the highest hill, stood a massive complex of buildings surrounded by a faintly visible magical barrier, the Ranoa Magic Academy. Welcome to the center of magical learning in the eastern continent, Roxy said, a hint of pride in her voice. And, hopefully, our best chance at understanding what's happening to the world. As the carriage rolled through the city gates, Naruto felt both hope and apprehension. This new world, built in the centuries of his dormancy, offered resources and knowledge that might help address the growing crisis. But it also represented everything that could be lost if the dimensional barriers failed completely. The comet, the Serpent's Tear, continued its silent journey across the night sky, a celestial harbinger of the challenges to come. "We'll find answers," Naruto promised, placing one hand on Kale's shoulder and meeting Roxy's determined gaze. "And we'll protect this world, whatever it takes." As carriage brought them deeper into the city, toward the academy that would become their temporary sanctuary, Naruto couldn't shake the feeling that forces beyond even his comprehension were converging. The wheel of fate had begun another turn, and he, along with the unusual boy who might be a vessel and the brilliant mage who had found him, were somehow at its center. 700 years of peace was about to end. The question was whether this world was ready for what would follow. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, The Sword and the Scroll. Dawn broke over Ranoa City, golden light spilling across crystalline spires and ancient stone. The academy grounds hummed with early morning activity as students and faculty prepared for the day. In a secluded courtyard nestled between the Department of Historical Magics and the Eastern Archives, Naruto watched Kale struggle with the most basic of magical exercises. "Focus on the flow," Naruto instructed, his voice calm but firm. "Magic isn't something you force, it's something you guide." Kale's face scrunched in concentration, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool morning air. A small stone hovered inches above his palm, wobbling precarious L. Why as the boy attempted to infuse it with earth attribute mana? The staff leaned against a nearby tree, deliberately removed from the exercise. "I can't do it without the staff," Kale muttered, frustration evident in his voice. "You can," Naruto countered. "The staff is a crutch. A powerful one, yes, but still just a crutch. True mastery comes from within." The stone wavered, then fell, bouncing off Kale's palm and rolling across the flagstones. The boy sighed, shoulders slumping in defeat. 3 days of training, and still he struggled with exercises first-year students mastered within weeks. "Perhaps we're approaching this wrong," came Roxy's voice from the courtyard entrance. The petite mage approached, several ancient texts tucked under her arm. "I've been researching traditional methods for training vessels." Naruto raised an eyebrow. "And they didn't use conventional magical pedagogy." She set her books down on a stone bench and opened the topmost volume to a marked page. "Vessels typically have unique mana circulation patterns. Trying to teach them like standard mages is like trying to make a fish climb a tree." Kale perked up. "So I'm not just bad at magic." "Quite the opposite," Roxy assured him. "Your mana capacity is extraordinary. It's the control mechanisms that are different." She knelt beside the boy, placing a small crystal sphere in his palm instead of the stone. "Try channeling your mana through this. It's a harmonic crystal. It adjusts to your natural frequency rather than forcing you to match a standard pattern." Kale took the crystal, his expression doubtful but willing. As his fingers closed around it, the sphere began to glow with a soft violet light, not the green expected from earth magic or the blue of water, but something between attributes. "Fascinating," Roxy murmured, her scholar's interest piqued. "Multi-attribute resonance at such a young age." Naruto watched silently, noting how the crystal's glow pulsed in a distinctive pattern, one he recognized from his experiences with certain divine artifacts. Not just multi-attribute resonance, but something rarer, dimensional harmonics. The boy was unconsciously manipulating the thin boundaries between worlds. "Good," Naruto said, deliberately keeping his tone casual despite the implications. "Now try to extend that energy about 6 inches from your body, create a simple mana shield." Kale nodded, brow furrowing in concentration. The violet light expanded outward, forming a wavering barrier around his small frame. It held for perhaps 5 seconds before collapsing, leaving the boy gasping but triumphant. "I did it," he exclaimed, looking up at his mentors with shining eyes. "You did," Naruto agreed, ruffling the boy's silver hair. "An excellent start." Roxy gave Naruto a meaningful look over Kale's head. They needed to discuss this development privately. "That's enough for this morning," Naruto told Kale. "Why don't you visit the kitchen for breakfast? I heard they're making honey cakes today." The boy needed no further encouragement, scampering off with the boundless energy of youth. Once he was out of earshot, Roxy turned to Naruto, her expression grave. "Dimensional harmonics," she said without preamble. "In a child his age, Naruto nodded. You recognized it too. I've only seen it described in theoretical texts. No documented case exists in Academy records. She gathered her books, hugging them to her chest like shields. The faculty committee is meeting this afternoon to discuss your research proposal. This new development will only intensify their interest in both of you. Quote, the research proposal was their cover story. Naruto positioned as a specialist in pre-divine war artifacts working with Roxy to understand the temple ruins. It provided access to Academy resources without immediately revealing his true identity. How secure is the Academy? Naruto asked, gazing at the shimmering barrier visible above the campus perimeter. Against conventional threats, nearly impregnable, Roxy replied. Against what we encountered in the forest. She hesitated. I'm less certain. Then perhaps we shouldn't linger too long. Naruto picked up Kale's staff, studying the ancient runes that seemed to shift subtly under his gaze. The Academy makes a tempting target. Too many innocent bystanders if our pursuers return in force. What do you propose? There's a mercenary guild outpost in Milishan, yes. Near the Western Territories. Roxy nodded. The Sword Sanctum. It's where warrior types train and gather for contracts. We'll need protection for our journey, companions skilled in combat as well as magic. You hardly seem to need protection, Roxy observed wryly. It's not for me. Naruto's expression softened with concern. It's for Kale. And for you. I can't be everywhere at once, and I'd rather not reveal my full capabilities unless absolutely necessary. Roxy considered this, then nodded decisively. I'll make arrangements. The Academy maintains good relations with the guild. We can request an escort under the pretext of a research expedition to additional ruins. How soon can we depart? 3 days, minimum. I need time to secure travel authorization and gather necessary supplies. She hesitated. There's also the matter of the committee meeting. We can't leave before then without raising suspicions. Naruto didn't like the delay, but acknowledged the necessity. Very well. 3 days. In the meantime, we should continue Kale's training and see what else we can learn from the Academy archives. Agreed. I've requested access to the sealed section, texts dating from the Divine War era. If approved, we might find more information about vessels and their connection to the dimensional barriers. As Roxy departed to make preparations, Naruto remained in the courtyard, contemplating their next moves. The Academy had proven both useful and constraining. Its vast resources offered insights he could never have gathered alone, but its bureaucracy and the attention their presence attracted created new complications. He sensed a subtle shift in the air, the faintest tremor in reality that most would never notice. Glancing skyward, he saw that even in daylight, the comet remained visible, a pale ghost against the blue. Its pulsations had increased since their arrival at the Academy, each beat sending ripples through the dimensional fabric. Time was running shorter than anyone realized. The committee meeting proceeded much as Naruto had anticipated, academic minds both brilliant and frustratingly narrow in their perspectives. 7 senior faculty members seated around a polished table in a tower room filled with magical instruments and rare artifacts. Questions, debates, and thinly veiled attempts to access his knowledge without offering much in return. Your expertise in pre-divine war artifacts is remarkably comprehensive, noted an elderly woman introduced as Archmage Teresia. Her tone hovering between admiration and suspicion, particularly for one so young. Naruto offered a modest smile, playing the role of passionate scholar. I was fortunate to study a master who devoted his life to the period. Much of his collection passed to me upon his death. And this master's name, pressed a thin man with spectacles and a skeptical frown. Jiraiya of the Eastern Isles. Naruto replied smoothly, a pang of nostalgia at using his old mentor's name. A reclusive figure in academic circles, I'm afraid. Roxy, seated beside him, intervened before the questioning could become more pointed. The artifacts recovered from the temple site show remarkable preservation. Preliminary dating suggests they're from the late Dragon Cult period, approximately 7 centuries old. She activated a projection crystal, displaying 3-dimensional images of items they had ostensibly discovered, carefully selected pieces that were genuine but revealed little of consequence. Most intriguing is this ritual vessel, she continued, highlighting a stone cup engraved with draconic script. The inscriptions reference dimensional stability and cyclical returns, POSI. Bly connected to the current celestial phenomenon. This successfully diverted the committee's attention to the artifact rather than Naruto's background. For the next hour, the discussion focused on technical aspects of their findings and potential connections to the comet. Finally, the committee chairman, a broad-shouldered man with a magnificent white beard, raised his hand for silence. The Academy approves continued funding for your expedition, he announced. However, given the sensitive nature of these discoveries and the unusual magical disturbances recently reported, we request that you accept an Academy observer to join your team. Naruto and Roxy exchanged glances. This was unexpected and potentially problematic. We work in difficult conditions, Naruto said carefully. Often, in territories where demon beasts remain active. The safety of an observer would be your responsibility. Naturally, the chairman interrupted with a benign smile that didn't reach his eyes. But I believe our candidate is more than capable of handling himself in dangerous situations. A side door opened, admitting a tall, slender man with silver hair similar to Kale's but streaked with black at the temples. He moved with the fluid grace of a combat mage, and the staff he carried hummed with suppressed power. Professor Silverell, the chairman introduced, our foremost expert in spatial magics and dimensional theory. The silver-haired mage bowed slightly. I look forward to observing your work firsthand. The parallels between the current spatial anomalies and historical accounts from the Divine War era are striking. Something in his tone, a subtle emphasis on striking, raised Naruto's suspicions. This was no routine academic appointment. We depart in 3 days for the Western Territories, Roxy said, maintaining her professional demeanor despite the complication. We'll add you to our requisition list, Professor. No need, Silverell replied smoothly. I have my own equipment and supplies. I'll meet you at the West Gate at dawn. With the matter apparently settled, the meeting adjourned. As they exited the tower, Roxy kept her voice low, speaking in the ancient language of the dragon cult, one of the few tongues they could be reasonably certain would not be understood by casual eavesdroppers. He's not what he appears, she murmured. Silverell specializes in scrying magic and remote viewing. He's the Academy's spymaster in all but title. You think they suspect my identity? Naruto replied in the same archaic tongue. Perhaps not specifically, but they sense something unusual. The Academy doesn't commit resources like this without reason. Naruto nodded thoughtfully. Then we proceed as planned, but with caution. This Silverell may prove either ally or obstacle, depending on his true loyalties. They parted ways at the central quadrangle, Roxy to secure their travel documents, Naruto to continue Kale's training. As he crossed the campus, Naruto observed the everyday life of the Academy with interest. Students of various ages hurried between classes, some practicing simple spells as they walked. Faculty members debated esoteric theories in sunlit courtyards. Library assistants carted stacks of ancient tomes between buildings. So much knowledge concentrated in one place. Knowledge that could prove crucial in the coming conflict. Yet oh so many innocent lives that would be endangered if the Academy became a battleground. He found Kale in their assigned quarters, practicing mana circulation with the harmonic crystal. The boy's Raul had improved notably even in the few hours since morning practice, the violet light flowing more steadily around his small form. Very good, Naruto approved, setting aside his concerns about Silverell for the moment. Your natural affinity is asserting itself. Kale beamed at the praise. The crystal helps a lot. It's like, he paused, searching for words. Like it knows what I'm trying to do before I do. Precisely. Naruto sat cross-legged on the floor, gesturing for Kale to do the same. Now, let's try something slightly more advanced. I want you to visualize your mana as water flowing through channels. The boy closed his eyes, following Naruto's instructions. The violet light responded, flowing more directionally now. Good. Now imagine those channels branching and connecting, forming a network throughout your body. For the next hour, Naruto guided Kale through increasingly complex visualization exercises, techniques adapted from chakra control methods he had learned as a young shinobi, modified for this world's mana system. The boy proved an apt pupil, his unusual affinity allowing him to grasp concepts that would confound much older students. One final exercise. Naruto said as the afternoon light began to fade. I want you to extend your awareness beyond your body. Feel the mana in the air around you, the stone beneath us, the plants outside the window. Kale's brow furrowed in concentration. His eyes remained closed, but the violet glow extended outward, tendrils reaching like curious fingers into the surrounding space. Suddenly, the boy gasped, eyes flying open in surprise. I felt people, he said, wonder and confusion mingling in his voice. Not just where they are, but who they are. Like little lights, all different colors. Naruto kept his expression calm. Though inwardly this development confirmed his growing theory. What you experienced is mana sensitivity, the ability to perceive the unique mana signatures of living beings. Is that normal? Kale asked, somehow sensing Naruto's concealed reaction. It's rare, Naruto admitted. Usually developed after years of training, not in beginners. He smiled reassuringly. But you're not exactly a typical student. Are you? Kale laughed, tension breaking. I guess not. His expression turned thoughtful. Your light was different from everyone else's. Bigger and older somehow. With strands of gold running through it. Before Naruto could respond, a knock at their door announced Roxy's return. The blue-haired mage entered, arms laden with scrolls and what appeared to be travel permits. Our departure is authorized, she announced, depositing her burden on a table. We leave at dawn in 3 days' time. I've secured supplies, transport to the western checkpoint, and permission to access ruins in 3 locations. She glanced at Kale. I've also registered you as a research apprentice. It gives you official status within the expedition. The boy straightened proudly. A real apprentice, complete with stipend, Roxy confirmed with a small smile. Though most of it will go toward proper equipment for you. You'll need weather-appropriate clothing, a sturdy pack, and protective gear. While Kale excitedly examined the official documents bearing his name, Roxy drew Naruto aside, lowering her voice. There are complications, she murmured. Reports from Western territories speak of increased demon beast activity around several ancient sites. And the mercenary guild has raised their rates in response. The dimensional weakening is affecting them as well, Naruto surmised. Demon beasts are sensitive to such disturbances. There's more. 3 villages near the old borders reported attacks by unknown assailants wearing ceremonial masks. She met his gaze meaningfully. Witnesses described them searching for the dragon's chosen one. The same term the death worm had used to describe Kale. Not coincidence. How much does Silveril know about these reports? Naruto asked. Officially, only what's in the general briefing. Roxy hesitated. Unofficially, as the Academy's intelligence specialist, probably everything. Naruto considered their options. Proceeding with the expedition meant potentially leading Silveril, whose allegiances remained unknown, directly to additional artifacts connected to Naruto's divine past. But delaying would only give their other pursuers time to strengthen their position. We continue as planned, he decided. But we'll take additional precautions. And perhaps arrange some insurance against our new companion's potential interference. Roxy nodded, understanding his meaning. I'll contact some former colleagues who operate outside Academy oversight. They can provide backup if needed. Good. Naruto glanced at Kale, who had fallen asleep on his pallet, the excitement of the day finally overtaking his youthful energy. He's progressing faster than expected. Today he demonstrated mana sensitivity at advanced levels. Roxy's eyes widened. That shouldn't be possible without years of training. For a normal student, no. For a vessel, Naruto left the implication hanging. The Academy's testing showed unusual potential. But nothing like this. Roxy's scientific curiosity visibly battled with concern for the boy. What does it mean for him? The historical accounts of vessels rarely mention their ultimate fates. Because those fates were usually tragic, Naruto thought but didn't say. Instead, he replied, it means we must prepare him as best we can, as quickly as possible. The forces seeking him won't wait for him to reach full maturity. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation and training. Kale's abilities continued to develop at an accelerated rate, particularly after Roxy introduced him to a modified training method combining visualization techniques from Naruto with structured exercises from the Academy curriculum. Naruto spent hours in the Academy archives, absorbing 7 centuries of history and magical theory, filling the gaps in his knowledge. The world had changed significantly during his dormancy, political boundaries redrawn, new magical traditions developed. Technological advancements achieved. Yet beneath these changes, the fundamental conflicts remained. Power, ideology, and the delicate balance between human ambition and existential threats. On the evening before their departure, a package arrived for Naruto, delivered by a nondescript messenger who vanished before questions could be asked. Inside lay a simple wooden box containing a headband of unusual design. The metal plate bearing a stylized leaf symbol. A note accompanied it, written in a cipher Naruto hadn't seen in centuries. The forest remembers its lost son. Others have crossed. Not all serve the eye. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the message was clear enough. Someone from the elemental nations, someone not controlled by Hitagami, had made contact. The head BA-ND was both proof and message. Naruto was not the only one aware of the weakening dimensional barriers. He secured the headband in an inner pocket of his travel cloak, saying nothing to Roxy or Kale about the delivery. Some secrets were best kept even from allies, at least until he could verify the sender's identity and intentions. Dawn broke clear and cold on their departure day. The west gate of Ranoa City stood open. Early morning merchants and travelers already forming queues for inspection. Their expedition assembled at the designated meeting point. Naruto, Roxy, and Kale, along with Professor Silveril and 2 academy guards assigned to escort them to the western checkpoint. Their transportation consisted of a sturdy wagon pulled by a pair of magical beasts resembling horses but with H-scaled hides and 6 limbs instead of 4. These, hex steeds, were known for their endurance and ability to navigate difficult terrain, practical choices for an expedition to remote regions. All preparations complete, Silveril inquired, approaching with a travel pack that seemed too small for an extended journey. His silver-black hair was tied back in a neat queue, and he had exchanged a kadam. I see robes for practical travel attire that nevertheless marked him as a person of status. We await only the final authorization, Roxy replied professionally. The gate captain should deliver it momentarily. Kale fidgeted nervously beside the wagon, his new travel clothes still stiff with newness. The staff remained wrapped in protective cloth, secured to his back with a harness Roxy had specially commissioned. At Naruto's insistence, they had crafted a less conspicuous carrying system that allowed quick access while minimizing its visibility. Excited for your first expedition, young apprentice? Silveril asked Kale, his tone friendly but his eyes calculating. The boy nodded, maintaining the cover story they had practiced. Professor Megardia says I have an affinity for detection magic. I'm going to help find hidden ruins. Quote, indeed, a valuable talent. Silveril smiled benignly, but Naruto caught the flicker of intense interest in his gaze. Perhaps you'll show me your techniques during our journey. Before Kale could respond, a uniformed official approached with their final documentation. After a cursory inspection of their permits and cargo, he stamped the papers and gestured them forward. Safe travels, the guard said mechanically. Be advised that increased beast activity has been reported along the western roads. Travel only during daylight and seek shelter at established waypoints. With these less than reassuring words, they passed through the gates of Ranoa City and began their journey west. The road stretched before them, well maintained near the city but gradually becoming rougher as they progressed into less populated regions. The first day passed uneventfully. Silveril proved a knowledgeable companion, sharing insights about the territories they traversed and asking questions that seemed innocuous but often probed at the edges of their cover story. Naruto responded carefully, revealing enough genuine knowledge to maintain his scholar persona while avoiding details that might expose his true identity. They made camp at a waystation, one of many established along major trade routes, offering secure shelter and basic amenities for travelers. As twilight deepened into night, Kale practiced his mana sensitivity exercises under Roxy's supervision while Naruto observed the surrounding countryside from a small rise near the waystation. Remarkable progress for one so young, came Silveril's voice as the silver-haired mage joined him. Your teaching methods must be exceptional. He's an exceptional student, Naruto replied neutrally. So, me talents manifest early when properly nurtured. Silveril made a noncommittal sound, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the comet, now visible even before full darkness, traced its path across the sky. Curious phenomenon, isn't it? He remarked. The Academy's astronomers are divided on its significance. Some claim it's merely a regular celestial event, documented every 7 centuries. Others suggest its appearance correlates with increases in magical disturbances. And your opinion, Professor? Naruto asked, studying the man's profile in the fading light. I believe in patterns, Silveril answered after a thoughtful pause. When multiple unusual events coincide, a comet, spatial anomalies, the discovery of a remarkably preserved temple, a child with extraordinary magical potential. I question whether coincidence is an adequate explanation. The statement hung in the air between them, not quite an accusation, but certainly a challenge. Sometimes patterns exist only in the mind of the observer. Naruto responded carefully. We humans are skilled at imposing order on randomness. Indeed, Silveril smiled thinly. And sometimes we impose randomness to obscure very real patterns. He turned to face Naruto directly. I wonder which we're doing, Scholar Uzumaki. With that cryptic remark, he returned to the waystation, leaving Naruto to contemplate the implications. Silver. Ill was sharper than anticipated, and potentially more dangerous. The following morning brought heavy mist that clung to the landscape, reducing visibility to mere yards. They departed the waystation after a brief meal, proceeding more slowly along the increasingly rugged road. By midday, they had entered the transitional lands between Ranoa's well-settled eastern regions and the more wild western territories. The landscape changed gradually, cultivated fields giving way to rolling hills covered in untamed forest, punctuated occasionally by small settlements fortified against the wilderness. The architecture shifted as well, incorporating more defensive elements and reflecting influences from the beast tribes that traditionally inhabited these borderlands. We'll reach Zolbat town by nightfall, Roxy informed them as they paused to rest the Hex steeds. It's the last major settlement before the frontier proper. We can resupply there and hire additional protection for the final leg to the first ruin site. Additional protection? Silveril questioned. Are our Academy guards insufficient? Standard protocol for frontier exploration, Roxy replied smoothly. The mercenary guild maintains an outpost in Zolbat specifically for research expeditions heading into beast tribe territories. Silveril nodded, apparently satisfied with this explanation. As they resumed their journey, Naruto noticed Kale becoming increasingly alert, his head turning periodically as if tracking something invisible to the others. What do you sense? Naruto asked quietly as they walked alongside the wagon. I'm not sure, the boy replied, brow furrowed in concentration. Something following us, but it keeps fading in and out, like it's not fully here. Naruto subtly expanded his own awareness, probing the surrounding area. A flicker at the edge of perception. Not a physical presence but a disturbance in the dimensional fabric, trailing their group like a shadow. Stay close to the wagon, he instructed Kale, keeping his tone casual. Continue your sensing practice, but don't strain yourself trying to locate it precisely. The boy nodded, understanding the unspoken message. They were being monitored. But acknowledging it directly might prompt action from their watchers. The road wound through increasingly dense forest as afternoon stretched toward evening. The Hex steeds grew restless, sensing something the humans could not, their 6 legs moving in complex patterns of agitation. Something's wrong, one of the Academy guards said, hand moving to his sword hilt. The beasts never act like this unless. His words cut off as a high-pitched keening sound pierced the air. The forest around them seemed to shiver, trees bending unnaturally as if space itself warped around them. Dimensional fluctuation, Roxy called out, her wand already glowing with defensive magic. Everyone, defensive positions. The warning came barely in time. Reality rippled, and from the distortion emerged 3 figures that defied natural description. They resembled humans in basic shape, but their limbs bent at impossible angles, and their skin undulated with patterns that hurt the eye to observe. Where faces should have been, they bore smooth reflective surfaces that showed distorted images of those who looked upon them. Mirror walkers, Silveril identified, his scholarly demeanor replaced by combat readiness. Theoretical entities that exist between dimensions. They shouldn't be possible outside laboratory conditions. Evidently someone forgot to inform them of that, Naruto remarked dryly. Positioning himself between the entities and Kale, the mirror walkers moved with jerky, unpredictable motions, surrounding their group in a loose triangle. The Academy guards drew their weapons, swords enchanted with stabilization magic designed to combat supernatural threats. The lead entity's mirrored face rippled, forming a crude approximation of a mouth. Vessel, it Gu. RG led in a voice like water flowing backward. Surrender the vessel. I think not, Naruto replied, golden energy beginning to gather around his hands. The mirror walker closest to the wagon suddenly lunged, its limbs elongating impossibly as it reached for Kale. Roxy responded instantly, a blast of concentrated water magic striking the creature with enough force to shatter stone. The entity started around the impact but didn't retreat. Silveril joined the defense, his silver-streaked hair whipping in an arcane wind as he traced complex patterns in the air. Spatial anchor, he called out, completing the spell. A grid of silver light materialized around the mirror walkers, constraining their dimensional shifting abilities. Clever, one of the entities hissed, its voice coming from everywhere and nowhere. But insufficient. The air seemed to fold inward, and suddenly there were not 3 but 7 of the creatures, the newcomers materializing through tiers in reality too small to see but large enough to permit passage. The vessel comes with us, their apparent leader declared. The convergence approaches. The worthy must be gathered. One of the Academy guards charged forward, his enchanted blade slicing through a mirror walker's elongated arm. The severed limb dissolved into prismatic light, but the creature showed no sign of pain or disability. Instead, the guard suddenly found himself entangled in what appeared to be his own shadow, solidified and turned against him. Naruto assessed the situation with the calm clarity of centuries of combat experience. These were not creatures that could be defeated by conventional means, their existence violated the fundamental rules of this reality. But that violation was also a weakness. Roxy, he called out, counter-harmonic wave, on my signal. The blue-haired mage nodded sharply, understanding his intent despite the unfamiliar terminology. She began gathering water mana, shaping it not into a destructive force but a resonating pattern. Meanwhile, Naruto traced symbols in the air, not the hand signs of his original world, but runic patterns that interacted with this world's mana flows. Golden light followed his fingers, the symbols hanging in the air like burning brands. Dimensional seal. First configuration, he intoned, completing the pattern. The runes shot outward, attaching themselves to the mirror walkers, who writhed in apparent discomfort. Now, Roxy, the water mage released her spell, a wave of pure blue energy that rippled through the air, attuned precisely to the frequency of Naruto's seals. When the two magics collided, they created a harmonic resonance that temporarily stabilized the local dimensional boundaries. The mirror walkers shrieked, their forms becoming more solid, more constrained by natural law. Silveril, recognizing the opportunity, unleashed a binding spell of remarkable complexity, silver chains of pure mana wrapping around the now vulnerable entities. For a moment, it seemed they had gained the upper hand. Then the lead mirror walker's reflective face shimmered, and a new voice emerged, deeper, more coherent, and chillingly familiar to Naruto. Clever, Dragon God, the voice purred. But only delaying the inevitable. The barriers thin, the paths open, and the vessel will fulfill its purpose, with or without your interference. With those ominous words, the mirror walkers simultaneously collapsed inward, vanishing with a sound like glass shattering. The dimensional ripples subsided, leaving only scorched earth where they had stood. Silence fell over the group, broken eventually by one of the Academy guards cursing softly as he helped his companion free from the shadow binding. What? Silveril asked with deliberate calm, turning to face Naruto, was that final voice? And why did it call you, Dragon God? The moment of truth had arrived sooner than anticipated. Naruto exchanged glances with Roxy, who gave a slight nod. No point maintaining their cover after this display. Because that's what I once was, Naruto answered simply. Orsted, the dragon god of protection, sealed away 7 centuries ago and recently awakened. Silveril's eyes narrowed, his posture shifting subtly into a defensive stance. If you expect me to believe such an outlandish claim, you already suspect the truth, Naruto interrupted. You've been testing me since we left Ranoa. The real question is not whether you believe me, but what you intend to do with that knowledge. A tense moment passed as Silveril visibly calculated his options. Finally, his shoulders relaxed marginally. The Academy suspected something unusual when the temple monitoring seals registered massive energy fluctuations 3 weeks ago, he admitted. Your arrival with Res. Urcher and a child of remarkable magical potential simply confirmed that something significant was occurring. He studied Naruto with new intensity. But a dragon god. The texts describe Orsted as a being of immense power, capable of reshaping reality itself. The texts exaggerate, Naruto said dryly. But not by much. He hasn't demonstrated his full capabilities, Roxy added, joining the conversation. For good reason. Such a display would draw attention from forces we'd rather avoid, as today's encounter demonstrates. Silveril glanced at the scorched earth where the mirror walkers had vanished. Those entities. They shouldn't exist in our dimensional configuration. The barriers between worlds are supposed to prevent such crossover. The barriers are failing, Naruto confirmed. The comet is both symptom and catalyst of that failure. If not addressed, the consequences will be catastrophic. And the boy, Silveril's gaze shifted to Kale, who stood wide-eyed beside the wagon, clutching his staff. What role does he play in this cosmic drama? That's what we're trying to determine, Naruto replied, not ready to reveal everything about Kale's potential status as a vessel. He's connected to events in ways we don't fully understand yet. The Academy guards, having recovered from the encounter, approached cautiously. Professor Silveril, one addressed the silver-haired mage. Should we abort the expedition and return to Ranoa? Silveril considered the question, his gaze moving between Naruto, Roxy, and the western road ahead. No, he decided finally. We continue as planned. The Academy sent me to investigate anomalies and gather information. I'd say we've confirmed there's something worth investigating. He turned to Naruto. I assume you've been honest about your destination. If not your identity. The western ruins do contain artifacts relevant to the current crisis, Naruto confirmed. And potentially information about how to address the dimensional weakening. Then our objectives align, for now. Silveril straightened his travel cloak, decision made. We should reach Zolbad before full dark. We can discuss our revised working relationship there. As they resumed their journey, now moving with greater urgency, Kale sidled up to Naruto, keeping his voice low. Those things. They were looking for me, weren't they? Just like the death worm. Naruto saw no point in shielding the boy from this truth. Yes, though I suspect their masters have different agendas. Why me? Kale asked, the question both plaintive and resigned. The voice of a child forced to confront adult complexities too soon. Because you're special, Naruto answered, placing a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. In ways that certain powers find very interesting. But remember this. Being special doesn't mean you lack choices. Whatever destiny others might envision for you, your path remains your own to determine. The boy considered this, then nodded solemnly. I choose to stay with you and Roxy, he said with surprising firmness. You're teaching me to be strong, not just using me like those creatures wanted to. Naruto felt a surge of pride at the boy's insight and determination. Perhaps there was hope yet, despite the darkening omens surrounding them. Zolbat town rose from the frontier landscape like a fortress, which, in many respects, it was. High walls of stone and enchanted wood surrounded a settlement that straddled the uneasy boundary between human and beast tribe territories. Watchtowers equipped with magical amplifiers scanned the surrounding wilderness for threats, while the gates stood reinforced against both conventional and supernatural attacks. They arrived as twilight deepened, the comet's blue-white glow, already visible against the darkening eastern sky. After a brief inspection and verification of their academy credentials, they were admitted through the heavy gates into a community unlike any Kale had seen before. Humans mingled with demi-humans of various races, beast folk with animal features, dwarf craftsmen with their distinctive proportions, even the occasional elf with their delicate features and pointed ears. The architecture reflected this diversity, accommodating different physiologies and cultural preferences within the shared defensive perimeter. The frontier breeds pragmatism, Roxy explained as they made their way toward the town's central district. Out here, cooperation against common threats takes precedence over racial prejudices. Though not without tension, Silveril added, nodding toward a group of beast men whose snarling exchange with human merchants teetered on the edge of violence. Recent incidents have strained traditionally cordial relations. They say, cured lodgings at an establishment called the Gilded Horn, an inn catering to magical practitioners and research expeditions. The proprietor, a heavy-set woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, assigned them rooms in a private wing typically reserved for academy personnel. Mercenary guilds been busy lately, she informed them as she handed over room keys. Lots of expeditions heading west, not all coming back. You'll want to visit them first thing tomorrow if you're looking for hired help. Has there been trouble on the roads? Roxy inquired. The innkeeper's expression darkened. More than usual. Beast tribes report strange occurrences in the ancient sites, lights where there shouldn't be any, creatures not native to these parts. She lowered her voice. And there's been talk of masked figures searching villages, asking about children with silver hair. Naruto and Roxy exchanged concerned glances. News of Kale's distinctive appearance had spread faster than anticipated. Thank you for the warning, Naruto said, pressing a gold coin into the woman's palm. If anyone asks similar questions here. Never seen such a child, the innkeeper replied with a wink, the coin disappearing into her apron. And my memory's particularly poor when it comes to our guests' descriptions. After a simple but hearty meal in the inn's private dining room, Silveril excused himself to make inquiries in the town. The academy guards took up positions outside their rooms, while Roxy, Naruto, and Kale gathered to discuss their next moves. The mercenary guild outpost here specializes in frontier protection, Roxy explained, unfolding a map of the Western Territories. We'll need experienced guides familiar with both beast tribe customs and the terrain around the ruins. Given our recent encounter, Naruto added, combat capability against supernatural threats will be essential. Kale, who had been unusually quiet since their arrival, finally spoke up. Those people the innkeeper meant. Ion. The ones looking for someone like me, they're working with the mirror walkers, aren't they? Not necessarily, Naruto answered carefully. There appear to be multiple factions interested in you, each with their own agenda. Some may serve Hitagami directly, others indirectly, and some may have entirely different motivations. All the more reason to strengthen our group before venturing further west, Roxy concluded, marking several locations on the map. These are the 3 ruin sites I've obtained permission to investigate. Each contains architectural elements suggesting connections to the dragon faith and potentially information about the dimensional barriers. Their planning session was interrupted by a commotion from the street below, shouts, the clash of metal, and a distinct Vey roar that was neither human nor beast. Naruto moved to the window, enhanced senses quickly assessing the situation. Demon beast attack, he reported. A large specimen, possibly a dire mantis, peers. What appears to be a merchant caravan that arrived after sunset. Roxy joined him at the window, concern etching her features. The town guards should handle it, but those caravans often carry Ivalian families alongside the merchants. Naruto nodded, decision made. I'll assist without revealing too much. Roxy, stay with Kale. This could be a diversionary tactic to separate us. Without waiting for a response, he leapt from the second-story window, landing lightly in the street below. The commotion centered on the eastern gate, where a merchant wagon had apparently broken an axle while fleeing from pursuers. Town guards formed a defensive perimeter around the stranded civilians, facing off against a massive insectoid creature that dwarfed the death worm they had encountered in the forest. The dire mantis stood nearly 20 feet tall, its chitinous body gleaming an unnatural blue in the comet's light. Its forelegs ended in serrated blades that had already sliced through one guard's shield like parchment. Naruto approached at a measured pace, analyzing the situation. The town's defensive enchantments should have prevented such a creature from approaching the walls, let alone breaching them. Someone had deliberately compromised the wards. The guard captain, a grizzled veteran missing an eye, barked orders to his soldiers, deploying them in a standard anti-beast formation. But Naruto could see the fear in their posture. This was no ordinary demon beast. It moved with unnatural intelligence, targeting the formation's weak points with precision. Fall back to secondary positions. Naruto called out as he reached the defensive line. This one's been enhanced. The captain shot him a suspicious glance. Academy types don't give orders to my guards, stranger. Not Academy, Naruto replied calmly. Just someone with experience fighting these creatures. As if to punctuate his point, the dire mantis suddenly lunged, its movement almost too fast to track. It bypassed the guards entirely, heading directly for the broken wagon where several children huddled in terror. Naruto moved. To observers, he seemed to vanish and reappear between the beast and its intended victims. Reality was simpler. He had moved too quickly for human eyes to follow. His palm struck the creature's thorax with carefully calculated force, enough to repel without revealing his true strength. The impact sent the dire mantis skidding backward, its many legs scrabbling for purchase on the cobblestone street. It reared back, compound eyes fixating on this new threat with unnerving focus. Get the civilians to safety. Naruto instructed the nearest guards without taking his eyes off the creature. This isn't a random attack. It's targeting the children specifically. The guards hesitated only briefly before following his direction, helping the merchant family retreat toward the town center. The dire mantis tracked their movement, preparing to lunge again, but Naruto stepped deliberately into its path. "Your masters sent you for a silver-haired boy," he said quietly, pitching his voice for the creature's sensory organs alone. "He's not here, but I am." The mantis paused, head tilting in an almost contemplative manner. Then it spoke, a sound no natural insect could produce, words forming through the vibration of specialized membranes. "Dragon. God," it chittered. "Unexpected. The convergence proceeds regardless." Naruto's suspicions deepened. Like the death worm and mirror walkers, this creature possessed knowledge it shouldn't have and capabilities beyond its species' natural limits. "Who enhanced you?" he demanded. "Whose agenda do you serve?" The mantis's forelegs slashed the air between them, a gesture almost like laughter. "Many players, many games. The eye sees all paths." Its head swiveled, compound eyes scanning the gathered townspeople who watched from what they believed was a safe distance. "If not the boy, then another vessel will be found." Without warning, it launched itself not at Naruto but toward the crowd. But this time, Naruto didn't hold back. Golden energy surged through his palm as he struck the creature's abdomen mid-leap. The force radiating through its enhanced carapace. The dire mantis shrieked as its body began to disintegrate from within, the unnatural enhancements destabilizing under Naruto's targeted attack. It collapsed in the street, limbs twitching spasmodically as its form broke down into motes of sickly blue light. "The door opens," it gurgled with its dying breath. "The king returns, and you cannot stop what comes." Then it was gone, leaving only scorched cobblestones where it had fallen. Silence gripped the street, eventually broken by the guard captain's impressed whistle. 17 years patrolling these walls, and I've never seen anyone take down a dire mantis single-handed." He approached Naruto, offering a warrior's salute. "Captain Volith, you have my thanks, stranger." "Naruto," he replied, accepting the salute with a nod. "Just happened to be in the right place. Lucky for us." The captain glanced at the scorched stones. "Though I'd wager luck had little to do with it. That was controlled destruction, not wild magic." His one good eye narrowed assessingly. "You're with that academy expedition staying at the Gilded Horn, yes? Here for mercenary escorts to the western ruins." Naruto nodded, seeing no reason to deny it. "Then you'll want to speak with the Sword of the Frontier tomorrow. She arrived 2 days ago with her team, best protection you'll find in these parts. If you can afford her rates." "The Sword of the Frontier. Ghislaine Dodoldia," Captain Volith clarified. "Sword King of the Beast Tribe Confederation and probably the only pay. RSON within 100 miles. Who could have handled that creature as efficiently as you just did?" The name stirred something in Naruto's memory, historical records he'd reviewed at the academy mention. A warrior lineage among the beast tribes, masters of sword techniques that incorporated mana manipulation similar to certain shinobi arts. "I appreciate the recommendation," Naruto said. "Where might I find her?" "The Mercenary Guild Hall opens at dawn," Volith replied. "Though after word of this spreads, and it will, she might come looking for you first." As the town guards restored order and attended to the frightened merchant family, Naruto returned to the inn. He found Roxy waiting anxiously in the common room, having witnessed parts of the confrontation from the window. "That creature spoke to you," she said without preamble, keeping her voice low. "What did it say?" "More references to the convergence and vessels," Naruto replied grimly. "But this time with a new element, if Kale isn't accessible." They'll seek other potential vessels. Roxy's brow furrowed. That contradicts historical accounts, which suggest vessels possess unique characteristics that cannot be replicated or substituted. Unless the criteria have changed, Naruto suggested. Or unless they're growing desperate enough to accept less ideal candidates. Neither possibility was reassuring. If the force behind these attacks were actively seeking multiple vessels, it suggested a larger, more coordinated effort than they had initially suspected. I've sent a coded message to my contacts at the academy, Roxy informed him. If similar incidents are occurring elsewhere, we need to know about it. Naruto nodded agreement. The captain recommended a specific mercenary group for our escort, led by someone called Ghislaine. The Sword King. Roxy looked surprised. She rarely takes standard escort contracts. Her team typically handles only the most dangerous assignments in Beast Tribe territories. She gave Naruto a speculative look. Though after your display tonight, I imagine she'll be interested in meeting you. Warriors of that caliber tend to recognize one another. The following morning dawned misty and cool. The frontier town already bustling despite the early hour. After a brief breakfast and confirming that Kale remained secure with one of the academy guards, Naruto and Roxy made their way to the Mercenary Guild Hall, a sturdy stone building marked by a crossed sword and staff emblem. Inside, the hall buzzed with activity, adventurers and mercenaries of various races examining job postings on a massive board, guild officials processing contracts at wooden counters, equipment vendors hawking specialized gear from small stalls along the walls. The atmosphere combi, the pragmatism of a business exchange with the camaraderie of warriors who shared similar experiences and dangers. Academy representatives, announced a guild receptionist after examining their credentials. Priority classification for Western Expedition. Please wait in consultation room 3, an appropriate team will be assigned shortly. They were directed to a private room furnished with a large table and chairs built to accommodate various body types. Maps of the Western territories covered one wall, marked with colored pins indicating known hazards and safe routes. They had wait. Perhaps 10 minutes when the door opened to admit one of the most impressive figures Naruto had encountered since his awakening. A tall, powerfully built beast woman with leonine features strode into the room. Her body rippling with controlled strength beneath a form-fitting combat suit. Tawny fur covered her exposed arms and face, while her amber eyes assessed them with predatory intensity. Swords of different lengths hung at her waist, their hilts worn smooth from years of use. Behind her followed two additional figures, a slender, agile-looking beast man with fox-like features and a human woman whose burn-scarred face did nothing to diminish her evident competence. Ghislaine, the leonine warrior, introduced herself, voice deep and faintly accented. Sword King of the Northern Confederation. These are my seconds, Regin the Swift and Elise the Spellblade. She fixed her gaze directly on Naruto. I'm told you single-handedly destroyed an enhanced dire mantis last night. Naruto met her gaze evenly. News travels quickly. Frontier towns run on information as much as trade. Ghislaine's ear flicked, a subtle expression of interest. Rare to see that level of combat proficiency from an academy scholar. I'm not typical academy personnel, Naruto replied. Clearly, the beast woman's nostrils flared slightly as she took in his scent. You don't smell entirely human. Interesting. Roxy intervened smoothly, redirecting the conversation to business. We seek escort to 3 ruin sites in Western territories, with potential hostile encounters expected. The expedition includes 2 researchers, a student apprentice, and 2 academy guards, plus an observer. Duration? Ghislaine asked. All business now. Minimum of 2 weeks, potentially up to a month depending on findings. The Sword King named a figure that would have bankrupted a minor noble house. Roxy didn't blink, producing an academy authorization for the amount plus a substantial contingency fund. Hazard compensation is generous, the blue-haired mage noted. We anticipate encounters similar to last night's, possibly worse. Ghislaine studied the authorization, then nodded once, decisively. We accept the contract. Her amber eyes returned to Naruto. Though I'm curious what you're really seeking in those ruins that warrants such resources. Information, Naruto answered honestly. About the comet, the dimensional disturbances, and artifacts connected to the dragon faith. The Sword King's expression sharpened with genuine surprise. Dragon Faith artifacts. Those are rare even in Beast Tribe territories. Most were destroyed during the Great Purge 5 centuries ago. We have reason to believe these sites were overlooked during that period, Roxy explained. Remote low. Cations combined with protective enchantments that disguised their true nature. Ghislaine considered this, then gestured to her companions. Prepare standard frontier loadouts, plus anti-magic barriers and distortion sensors. We depart at noon. To Naruto and Roxy, she added, I'll want a full briefing on expected threats before we leave town limits. No surprises once we're in the wilderness. After finalizing contract details and arranging to meet at the western gate, Naruto and Roxy returned to the inn to prepare their expedition for departure. Silveril had returned sometime during the night, bringing news that reinforced their concerns. 3 more villages reported searches by masked figures, the silver-haired professor informed them. Always asking about children with unusual ICAL potential or distinctive appearances. And there have been abductions, at least 7 children taken in the past month alone. A pattern emerges, Naruto observed grimly. They're collecting potential vessels systematically. For what purpose remains unclear, Silveril added. Though local rumors speak of a temple deep in the borderlands where the worthy are being gathered for some ritual connected to the comet. This aligned with the Mirror Walker's references to the convergence and gathering the worthy. A larger plan was clearly in motion, with Kale representing just one piece in a complex game. By noon, their expanded group assembled at the western gate. Naruto, Roxy, Kale, Silveril, the 2 academy guards, plus Ghislaine and her team. Their supplies had been transferred to a more robust frontier wagon pulled by 4 hex steeds, better suited to the rugged terrain ahead. Additional provisions and specialized equipment had been secured based on Ghislaine's recommendations. As the gates swung open, revealing the wild frontier beyond, Naruto felt both apprehension and determination. The dimensional barriers continued to weaken, he could sense it more acutely now, like a persistent discord in the world's underlying harmony. Whatever answers lay in the western ruins, they needed to find them quickly. Ghislaine took point position, her powerful form moving with surprise. Grace as she led them away from Zolbat's protective walls. Naruto found himself studying her technique, a fighting style that combined elements recognizable from his original world with this world's unique mana manipulation. The Sword King noticed his attention, dropping back slightly to walk alongside him as the wagon rumbled behind them. You move like a warrior, not a scholar, she observed without preamble. Every step measured, aware of your surroundings, always positioned to respond to threats. Her amber eyes assessed him with professional interest. Where did you train? Far from here, Naruto replied. In a place where combat was a way of life from childhood. Ghislaine's ear flicked again, that subtle expression of interest. Your technique when you destroyed the mantis. It wasn't sword style or conventional magic. Something else entirely. Something older, Naruto acknowledged, deciding to offer a partial truth. Based on principles that predate current magical theory. This clearly intrigued the beast woman. The old ways often prove most effective against ancient threats. She gestured toward the wilderness ahead. These lands remember techniques long forgotten by human academies. The beast tribes preserve combat traditions dating back to the Divine War. Including dragon faith techniques, Naruto asked, watching her reaction carefully. Ghislaine. Nee's stride faltered almost imperceptibly, surprise quickly masked by professional composure. Some lineages maintain such knowledge, she admitted. Though it's not discussed openly with outsiders. Her gaze sharpened. Your interest seems personal. Before Naruto could respond, a call from their rearguard alerted them to approaching riders, a small group moving rapidly from the direction of Zolbat town. Ghislaine signaled a defensive halt, her hand moving to the hilt of her middle sword. The approaching group resolved into 3 riders on conventional horses rather than magical beasts. Their attire marked them as town guards. With Captain Volith at their lead, they pulled up shortly before reaching the expedition, the captain dismounting to approach on foot, a gesture of non-aggression. Fortunate we caught you before you ventured too far, Volith called out, nodding respectfully to Ghislaine before addressing Naruto. A delivery arrived for your expedition shortly after your departure. The messenger insisted it was vital. He presented a cylindrical case of ancient design, sealed with wax bearing an unfamiliar crest. The messenger was unusual. Not human, not beast tribe. Wouldn't give a name, just said, "The Forgotten remembers." Naruto accepted the case, immediately recognizing the material, dragonhide, preserved through magical means to last centuries. The seal B, or the stylized image of a dragon consuming its own tail, the symbol of cyclical time used by the dragon faith's inner circle. "Thank you for bringing this," he told the captain. "It may indeed prove important." After Volith and his guards departed, the expedition formed a loose circle around Naruto as he examined the case more carefully. The seal responded to his touch, wax softening in relia. Sing without being broken, recognizing him as its intended recipient. Inside lay a scroll of similar age and composition as the case, the parchment covered in script that shifted and changed as they watched, rearranging itself into currently readable text. Advanced translation enchantment, Roxy breathed, scholarly fascination overriding caution as she leaned closer. Self-updating to match the reader's language comprehension. "I've only read about such techniques, never seen one functioning." Naruto unrolled the scroll carefully, revealing an elaborate diagram centered around what appeared to be a map, with text flowing around its borders in spiraling patterns. As the translation magic completed its work, the purpose of the document became clear. It was a guide to hidden dragon faith sites, including the 3 ruins they already intended to visit plus several others not documented in Academy records. But more significantly, it contained a prophecy written in verse form along the scroll's lower edge. "When forgotten God awakens from slumber deep, and child of convergence begins to reap the power sleeping in ancient stone, paths will open that were unknown. Seek the temple where waters part, find the altar, the dragon's heart, where scale and scroll together bound, reveal the truth that must be found. For only vessel and guardian paired can mend what time and treachery tiered. Before the eye that watches all, brings 3 worlds to final fall." Silence fell over the group as they absorbed the implications of these words. Even Ghislaine, who had maintained professional detachment until now, appeared disturbed by the prophecy. "The forgotten god and the child of convergence," she murmured, glancing between Naruto and Kale. "Not Academy researchers at all, are you?" Silveril, who had been examining the map portion of the scroll, looked up sharply. "This changes our expedition parameters considerably. 3 of these additional sites align perfectly with recorded dimensional disturbances." Naruto rolled the scroll carefully, returning it to its protective case. "Our objectives remain the same: gather information about the dimensional weakening and find methods to address it. This simply provides additional guidance, and confirms you are indeed Orsted, the dragon god," Ghislaine stated flatly, surprising everyone with her directness. "The Dodoldia clan has maintained the old knowledge through generations of sword kings. We recognize the signs." Rather than appearing hostile, the beast woman seemed almost reverent, her posture shifting subtly to one of formal respect. "The prophecies spoke of your return during the time of the Serpent's Tear. I did not expect to witness it personally." Naruto met her gaze steadily. "Then you understand the gravity of what we face." "The sundering of worlds," Ghislaine confirmed grimly. "The final confrontation with the one who watches." She straightened, hand moving to her heart in a formal salute. "The Dodoldia clan renews its ancient oath. My sword stands with the dragon god." This declaration clearly surprised her companions, though they followed their leader's example with only momentary hesitation. Even Silveril and the Academy guards seemed affected by the solemnity of the moment, though confusion mingled with their respect. "I accept your oath," Naruto replied formally, golden energy brie fly illuminating the whisker marks on his face. "Though I stand not as a god requiring worship, but as a protector seeking allies against a common threat." Kale, who had remained silent throughout this exchange, suddenly stepped forward, the ancient staff glowing faintly in his hands. "The temple where waters part," he said, voice taking on the same distant quality as when he had recited the prophecy in the carriage. "I've seen it in my dreams. A place where a river splits around a stone island, with 7 pillars rising from the water." All eyes turned to the boy, whose unusual perceptive NSS continued to manifest in surprising ways. Ghislaine studied him with new interest, nostrils flaring as she took in his scent more deliberately. "Dragon touched," she pronounced after a moment. Not by blood, but by blessing. The vessel of prophecy. Her amber eyes returned to Naruto. You found him just in time, it seems. He found me, Naruto corrected. Or perhaps we found each other when needed most. The Sword King nodded, accepting this philosophical nuance. With newfound purpose, she gestured toward the wilderness trail. Then we have our direction. The first site on your map, the Temple of Divergent Waters, lies 3 days' journey northwest, in territory claimed by the Boris Beast tribe. Your people? Roxy inquired. Distant cousins, Ghislaine clarified. Hospitable enough if approached properly. Hostile if their customs are disrespected. With me as your escort, you'll be granted safe passage. As they resumed their journey, the dynamic within the expedition shifted subtly. The revelation of Naruto's true identity and the prophecy's confirmation of Kale's importance elevated their mission from academic research to something more profound, a quest with implications for the very fabric of reality. Ghislaine fell into step beside Naruto again, her manner now combining professional respect with genuine curiosity. The histories speak of your final battle against Hitagami and Laplace, how you sacrificed yourself to seal the dimensional breach. Yet here you stand, awakened centuries earlier than prophesied. The seal was designed to last a millennium, Naruto confirmed. Something has accelerated the process, or deliberately weakened it. Hitagami's agents, Ghislaine surmised. The human god's influence never truly waned, despite the dragon faith's efforts to expose his true nature. You know much about matters most humans consider myth or ancient history, Naruto observed. The Sword King's expression hardened. Beast tribes suffered most when the truth was suppressed. When the Millist Church rose to dominance, they painted us as demon worshippers for maintaining our connection to the dragon faith. Thousands died in the purges that followed. Her hand unconsciously moved to her middle sword, a blade Naruto now noticed bore subtle draconic etchings on its sheath. This blade has passed through 17 generations of Sword Kings, each sworn to remember the truth and await your return. This level of devotion, maintained across centuries, was both humbling and concerning to Naruto. He had never sought worship, even during the height of his recognition as a dragon god. Such faith created expectations he wasn't certain he could, or should, fulfill. The world has changed greatly, he said carefully. As have I. The powers I once commanded are different now, transformed by my long dormancy, yet still sufficient to destroy an enhanced demon beast with a single strike, Ghislaine noted with the practical assessment of a warrior. Gods may change, but power recognizes power. She glanced back at Kale, who walked alongside Roxy near the wagon. And vessels have always been key to amplifying divine influence in the mortal realm. This observation struck uncomfortably close to concepts Naruto had been reluctant to discuss openly. The historical use of vessels by divine entities often bordered on exploitation, mortal conduits. Used and discarded once their purpose was served. He had no intention of treating Kale in such a manner, regardless of the boy's potential. The boy will determine his own path, Naruto said firmly. If he chooses to assist in addressing the dimensional crisis, it will be his decision, not one forced upon him. Ghislaine studied him with new appreciation. Perhaps that is why you were chosen as guardian rather than another dragon god. Compassion is rare among divine beings. The journey continued through increasingly wild territory, the well-maintained road giving way to rougher trails that wound through dense forest and rocky outcroppings. By late afternoon, they had entered true frontier lands, regions where civilization's influence faded and nature ruled with primal authority. Ghislaine selected their first campsite with a warrior's eye for defensibility, a small clearing backed by a cliff face, with good visibility in all other directions and a freshwater spring nearby. As darkness fell, they established a perimeter of protective wards combining academy magic with beast tribe techniques that Ghislaine and her team contributed. Around the campfire that evening, the expanded group began to forge connections that transcended their diverse backgrounds. Roxy and Silveril engaged in scholarly debate about dimensional theory, finding common ground despite their initial mistrust. The Academy guards shared frontier tales with Ghislaine's seconds, exchanging information about recent anomalies they had encountered. And Kale, ever curious, moved between conversations, absorbing knowledge with remarkable retention. Naruto observed these interactions with quiet satisfaction. Unity would be essential in the challenges ahead, and these first tentative bonds represented hope amid growing dangers. As the conversations wound down and night watches were assigned, he found himself sitting alone by the fire, contemplating the prophecy and its implications. Ghislaine approached silently, her natural grace allowing her to move without disturbance despite her powerful frame. Without speaking, she seated herself opposite him, the flames between them casting dramatic shadows across her leonine features. "You carry a burden few could comprehend," she observed after a comfortable silence. "God, guardian, and guide, roles that often conflict with one another." Naruto acknowledged this insight with a slight nod. Each requires different priorities, different perspectives. Balancing them is challenging. The Sword King tradition faces similar conflicts, Ghislaine offered. "We are warriors, protectors, and spiritual leaders for our people. When these duties diverge, we must choose which takes precedence." "And how do you choose?" Naruto asked, genuinely curious about her philosophy. The beast woman considered the question, amber eyes reflecting the dancing flames. "By determining which choice best serves life's continuation," she finally answered. "Not merely survival, but the opportunity to thrive, to grow beyond current limitations." A surprisingly profound response from one whose primary identity was as a warrior. Naruto found himself reevaluating his initial impression of Ghislaine Dodoldia, recognizing layers of wisdom beneath her martial exterior. "A worthy principle," he acknowledged. "One I've struggled to maintain across centuries of conflict." "The old texts say you were not born a god," Ghislaine said, framing it as neither question nor accusation but simple statement. "That you came from elsewhere, bringing powers unknown to our world, and were elevated through some cosmic convergence." Naruto tensed slightly, then deliberately relaxed. This aspect of his history was not widely known, even among Dragon Faith adherents. That the Doldia clan preserved such specific knowledge suggested their connection to past events ran deeper than he had realized. "I was human once," he confirmed. "A warrior from another world with its own conflicts and powers. When dimensional instability brought me here, my native energy, chakra, interacted with this world's mana in unexpected ways. Creating something new," Ghislaine concluded. "Neither fully human nor fully divine, but a bridge between realms." Her ear flicked thoughtfully. "Perhaps that is why you were chosen as the vessel's guardian. You understand both mortality and godhood from within." The insight was startlingly perceptive, highlighting qualities in Ghislaine that transcended her role as hired protection. In her, Naruto recognized a potential ally of significant value, not merely for her combat prowess, but for her understanding of the deeper patterns at work. Their conversation might have continued, but a disturbance at the camp's perimeter drew their attention. One of the detection wards had activated, its magical signature pulsing in warning rather than immediate alarm. Ghislaine was on her feet instantly, hand moving to her smallest sword, the weapon approach. "Ruijerd for precision work rather than major combat." "Something approaches," she murmured. "Something small, moving deliberately." Naruto extended his senses, confirming her assessment. The presence felt neither hostile nor particularly powerful, yet moved with purpose directly toward their camp despite the protective wards, suggesting either intelligence or guidance from a more powerful entity. They approached the triggered ward, Ghislaine signaling her seconds to maintain defensive positions around the rest of the camp. In the darkness beyond their perimeter, a faint glow materialized, soft sea elver light emanating from what appeared to be a small animal making its way through the underbrush. The creature that emerged into the ward light defied easy classification. Approximately the size of a fox, it resembled a miniature dragon with fur instead of scales, its body luminous with internal silver light. 6 delicate legs carried it forward with deliberate grace, while intelligent eyes, calm, completely black without pupil or iris, regarded them with evident awareness. Spirit beast, Ghislaine identified softly. Servants of the boundary realms. They don't manifest in the physical world without significant purpose. The creature paused at the edge of their wards, then sat back on its haunches in a distinctly non-threatening posture. From its mouth emerged not sound but a small object at it placed carefully on the ground before retreating 3 precise steps. Naruto approached cautiously, sensing no immediate danger but maintaining vigilance. The object proved to be a simple river stone. Unremarkable except for a symbol etched into its surface, a spiral identical to the one Naruto had worn as a shinobi of Konoha. A message from whoever had sent the headband earlier. He picked up the stone, and immediately felt a resonance, not magic or chakra exactly, but something between them. The stone was a key, activating only in his presence. The spirit beast watched expectantly, early waiting for him to understand its purpose. Acting on intuition, Naruto channeled a small amount of his unique energy into the stone. The spiral symbol glowed briefly, then projected a three-dimensional image above his palm, a map overlay that matched their current location but highlighted a position approximately 2 miles north of their camp. The message was clear. Someone wished to meet someone who knew not only Naruto's current identity but his original one as well. A summoning, Ghislaine observed, having watched the process with keen interest. Will you answer it? I must, Naruto decided after brief consideration. This may be connected to the shinobi I encountered after awakening, potential allies from my original world. The Sword King nodded understanding. I will accompany you. The camp remains secure with my seconds and the academy personnel. Though tempted to refuse and go alone, Naruto recognized the tactical wisdom in having backup when meeting unknown entities. Ghislaine had proven herself both capable and insightful, a valuable ally in potentially treacherous circumstances. Very well, he agreed. We move quietly and remain alert for traps. After briefing Roxy and arranging additional protections around Kale, they departed into the night, the spirit beast leading the way with its silver glow providing just enough illumination to navigate the dense forest. Ghislaine moved with remarkable silence despite her size, matching Naruto's stealth with practiced ease. The spirit beast led them on a winding path that seemed deliberately designed to disorient, doubling back. Crossing streams multiple times, passing through thickets that appeared impenetrable until approached from precisely the right angle. Standard counter-tracking techniques that Naruto recognized from shinobi practice. Finally, they reached a small clearing dominated by an enormous fallen tree. The massive trunk, easily 15 feet in diameter, had been hollowed out by time and natural processes, creating a chamber-like space within. The spirit beast paused at the entrance, then vanished, not gradually but instantly, as if it had never existed. A dimensional pocket, Naruto identified, sensing the subtle distortion around the fallen tree. Space folded within space, clever and extremely difficult to detect. The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.